Do do do, theme song. Do do do, I'm broke, so this is my theme song. Do do do, just imagine this is an awesome theme song. Do do, theme song. Left of the box. Hello, welcome to Left of the Box. Bonjour, bienvenue. I'm Sandy. Yes, today I'm actually going to attempt a shorter live stream because I wasn't really planning on streaming today. However, I was thinking about it and I didn't know if I'd be able to stream tomorrow because tomorrow I have something big happening like an early afternoon and I don't know how long it's going to take. And so I don't know if there's going to be enough time between that event and me unwinding from that event and setting up everything and then spending another few hours on here with everyone would be maybe a bit much for me to do in one day. But there's some things I really wanted to cover, some interesting things to go over. But welcome, 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 everyone. We had a sandbox full of M's starting off with, we had Mudbuds, My Dogs Are Goth, Morbius Dragon. And then we also got FG coming in and Good for Gabby. So welcome, 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 Grand Theft Autobot. We're all doing good here. Yeah, trying to keep this short. Anyway, well, Happy New Year to you too, Jason Parker. Thank you. And the reason why I want to try to keep this short is the original reason why I was thinking of moving it from Tuesday to begin with is there's no good time to stream for the length of time that I normally stream because the serfs stream earlier in the afternoon. So I was thinking of starting at 4, but then that was too much crossover with the serfs. And starting at 7 is Left Reckoning. So, you know, I want to be done because I know there's a lot of crossover audience with them as well. We need a leftist online content creating TV guide. That's what we need. We need a content creating leftist TV guide. If anyone remembers what a TV guide is, that would be very helpful so I could at least figure out when to slot myself. And that's why I moved to thinking Wednesday would be better, because if I start at 6 on Wednesday, then there'd be a good chance I'd be done on time for Letter Hacks show. There's just so much content out there these days, which is good. It's good to have variety. Okay, let's see. Anyone else in chat? Yes, my dogs are goth. I am taking space. I'm taking my space. So, also, just in case, the person who sent me the Amazon wish list gift box didn't watch my last live stream, I wanted to, again, thank that person for sending me, it was just like a box of a bunch of little things from my wish list, which was super nice. It had cat treats in it, cat toys, human treats, which I really appreciate. And it just kind of brightened my day to get that on my doorstep. I don't feel comfortable necessarily mentioning names of people on my streams or in Twitter and things of that sort, because I guess that's a personal thing for me. I wouldn't want my name out there for every little gift that I send out if come the day that I can actually afford to do that again. I don't know. It feels like it just puts people on the spot. But I really, really do appreciate it. And all the people who send like a little tag with it, sometimes you can send a personalized message. Sometimes it's just the person's name. I keep all of those. Just as, you know, a good reminder that I'm appreciated. seeing those, seeing the little comments, the reminders, seeing people go, you know, put that investment in me. I really, really appreciate it. And yeah, so I keep all those little tags. I'm a bit of a collector that way, just to remind myself that, we're doing good work here. That's the goal, doing some good work. uh, but yeah, I appreciate every contribution people can give, big or small, it doesn't matter. I know times are tough. Even just, sharing and liking the stream. You can do that now. Get more people in chat. It'd be nice to get, like 50 plus people in. I don't think I've ever gotten over that arbitrary number yet, so let's work on that. Let's see. Yeah, so trying to put into place all the things that I want to cover. So I just have one web browser with a whole bunch of tabs open, as opposed to multiple web browsers with a whole bunch of tabs open of things that I want to cover. Because like I said, I wanted to kind of keep things a little bit more concise today. But I know that if I wait till Friday to do my next live stream, if I don't stream tomorrow, there's just going to be so much to cover. And there was something that kind of really got under my skin, like really, really got under my skin. And none of the other leftist content creators are talking about it because it's all Canadian news. So I get the monopoly on Canadian news here. But there's more than just Canadian news, of course. There's the bigger picture news, things to terrify people in the States, as always. But the Canadian news is important, and I put in the title some of it being, the state of Canada's police state. It's wow. It's weird. There's no consistency, and yet there is consistency. We'll get a bit more into it. There was just a whole bunch of stories that came out recently about it that just kind of threw me through a loop. Also, I want to talk about Star Trek. Going to talk about Star Trek. Because I've been catching up with Star Trek Next Generation. Nobody got my question from, what was it, just yesterday that I tweeted it out? There's an episode of Star Trek Next Generation that just made me cry, like sloppy cry when I was young, when I first saw it. And I just watched that episode again, still cried. And so I asked people if they knew which episode it was, and nobody has guessed it so far. But I've gotten to the part in Star Trek Next Generation where it starts to overlap with Deep Space Nine. So I've been trying to start to stagger watching them. And I came across an episode of Deep Space Nine, and I remember watching it when it first came out and watching it now. Wow, did this episode ever hit differently now? And we'll get into why. You don't have to be a fan of Star Trek to understand what I'm going to be talking about. It helps because I always like talking about Star Trek with people. But you don't need to know the Star Trek universe for what I'm going to cover in it. That said, I should probably quit rambling and get on with the news, but I still have that really annoying habit of before I do that, I'm going to check the sandbox. My dogs are goth. You're doing good work, Sandy. Well, thank you. Really appreciate it. Soul Life. Sorry, I was late. YouTube notifications are useless on PC, and the damn YouTube algorithm failed me. That's unfortunate. Yeah, I need to figure out the algorithm a little bit better. Grand Theft Autobot. Still trying to guess it. When Tasha died? No, it wasn't. That one hit me hard as a kid because, starting to watch Star Trek Next Generation was kind of like the graduation from more kid-orientated programming. And so that was the first time in a series one of the main characters died. And I was so confused as to why they would allow this to happen. Oh, I'll tell everyone what the episode is when we get to the Star Trek talk. But nobody guessed it. Nobody guessed it. Although there were so many other episodes that people did guess that I'm like, wow, if you ever want to have like a devastating cry fest day of Star Trek content, you just list all of these Star Trek episodes together and just vent it all out. Just because when you put them all together, there are some really devastating episodes of Star Trek. Oh. Yeah, people are saying the one where Picard lived a whole lifetime. That one, that one was suggested. Again, nobody has guessed it. That one was suggested. Anyway, before we get too distracted with Star Trek, let's actually get on to the horrible news. We'll start bad. Yeah, just the state of the states is horrendous. Like absolutely horrendous when it comes to LGBTQ plus folks. So let's go here. From Aaron Reed. Oh, let's make this bigger. I make it bigger for you guys, but I hate it this size when I'm just browsing on it. So then I shrink it, but then I have to remember to make it big for you guys so that you can see it better. Aaron Reed, if you're still on the Hostile Fart Sauna Twitter, I encourage you to go follow her, look up her newsletter, her Substack, everything. She is absolutely amazing covering this. I don't know how she has the stamina to cover all of the horrible queer news in the States. Because it could be so soul-sucking and draining to, be part of the community and also have to report on the horrors that is that community down in the States. So she's tweeted out, call somebody transphobic or homophobic in Florida, you may have to pay a $35,000 under new Florida bill. Accusations of transphobia, homophobia, sexism, or racism would be defamation. You could not use their religious or scientific beliefs. Subscribe to her work to learn more. Wow. Okay, so you can get charged basically with hate crimes. It would be like the equivalent of being charged with hate speech, I would imagine, here in Canada. For properly identifying somebody as being transphobic, homophobic, sexist, or racist. And those would all be crimes. Yet people down in the States are still free to call queer folks groomers, censor the C words. There's more than one now because you have cis, which is now like a horrible thing to call someone, or the that stuff that you can put peanut butter on, those white square things you can put peanut butter on. That's now like a no word. You can't say that. Even though, 4th of July, there's a whole bunch of like firecrackers out there, but that word all depends on context. You can get in a lot of trouble with that word. But I like my peanut butter and crackers. Don't get me wrong. Peanut butter and crackers rock. And I eat a ton of peanut butter. It's my autism food of the day type thing. It's my everyday food. Yeah, every day I'm eating some sort of peanut butter. Oh. Yeah, so you can get in trouble for saying things like that. And you can now get in trouble for, I would imagine, properly identifying somebody as being transphobic and homophobic. And not just a little, $35,000, like talk about silencing speech. This is just so beyond horrendous. So Aaron continues, the new bill would eviscerate any protections for those who accuse others of transphobic or homophobia in particular. It also strips journalism protections. Holy crap. So you can't even report it in the news. One section of the bill says the accusations of transphobia or homophobia are defamation per se. You cannot use their religious or scientific beliefs expression to prove truth of your accusation. So you literally couldn't call a pastor homophobic for a sermon. Similarly, the bill protects people from videos that have gone viral by stating that such people would not be considered public figures, even in a limited way. So if a shoekeeper kicks someone out while calling them abominations unto God, you can still be on the hook. The bill was brought forward by Senator Bordeaux, who has brought bills that could chill free speech in the past. Famously, he was one who submitted the Florida blogger bill, which would require bloggers in Florida who criticize the government to register with the state. This is the second time the bill has been brought. It passed a subcommittee in 2023 but died in the Judiciary Committee. This appears to be the second attempt at the bill, starting it on the Senate side. Lastly, I am an LGBTQ plus journalist writing about legislation like this and all of the cultural moments, big events around trans and queer life. Your support is essential for me to do my work. If you can, please support her work. Erin in the Morning on Substack. Yeah, the Republicans, just all about that free speech, if you can afford the fines. Just like we all know the hypocrisy. We all see it. I have a hard time understanding like what will it take to register in the brains of right-wingers who have been like indoctrinated into this. Like people who have the potential to be brought over to the left. Let's put it that way. People who have a conscience, have a soul, but are so, immersed in this right-wing culture and so sold on what they're saying. Like, what will it take for them to wake up to what is happening? Because you can literally have people say, oh, free speech in one sentence, and then like a sentence and a half later be like, oh yeah, but we're going to be fining people. Like, how dare you call us transphobic or homophobic? Like that is a sin beyond belief. Like, never mind this legislation that we're enacting to try to erase trans folk from society. That's not the problem. The problem is when you call me transphobic. That's what we're going with. Like, and for all the religious, the fundamental religious fascist Christians that are on board with this, again, like, at what part do you think, when I've read the Bible, like they've done that, this doesn't really fall in line with the teachings of Christ. When do they wake up to that? When? It's just, and I worry about this a lot. Even though I'm up here in Canada, the place that's so queer friendly that if you don't psychically know somebody's pronouns, you can be tossed into conversion camp therapy. No, it's not that. Yeah, Canada is better, safer relatively to the States, but we are not safe up here. And I've done videos on that. And my worry is the amount of influence we have up here from the States. If the Conservatives get into power again, like it's only a matter of time federally before they get into power again, but if they do that soon, what we're looking at up here is going to be very bad. It is much harder in Canada to change legislation like this. We are protected far more under our Charter of Rights and Freedoms. But the culture is getting a lot more hostile. And it's a weird dichotomy going on because, well, there seems to be far more acceptance across the board. It's the people who are bigoted, the people who are hateful, who are just becoming louder, more aggressive, more threatening in their actions. So it's not necessarily that they're winning, it's that they're becoming more violent. And it can get very scary up here, and a lot of the influence comes from the States. So yeah, all you Americans, I'm blaming you for all of our woes. No, it is, and there's no easy way out of it. A lot of people say, why don't you just move? And we've been over that plenty of times on this channel, and other people have been over it. You can't just move. It is impossible if you don't have the means, the money, and you shouldn't have to, is what it comes down to. In countries that confess to be as free as Canada and the United States, we shouldn't have to move to areas that recognize us as human beings, that protect our rights. It should be across the board in our countries. And as I say, for all the Americans, it's in your benefit too to make sure that Canada doesn't go this route because, a lot of Americans like to think of us as a life raft. Well, you might want to make sure all the holes in the life raft are plugged before you jump in. Okay, so I just wanted to get that covered, and let's go and check what's happening in the sandbox. Good. Got my hair all not super curly today. I like to have variety in my hair when I can, while I still have it. Okay. Grand Theft Autobot. No, I did not cry when Beverly was having candle sex with a ghost. That one did not make me tear up. We'll get into Star Trek later on. That's the hook to keep everyone in till the end. Andrew K., don't you dare knock the Wesley Crusher episodes. I had a huge crush on him when I was a kid. Now I have a crush on everyone else. Now that I'm old enough. Yeah, now that I'm like closer in age to a lot of the people who were in there, it's like, damn, this entire crew is sexy. Yeah, my dogs are goth. What happens there comes up here. Yeah. Hello, Tyler. Welcome to this. And Kelly Bach and a whole bunch of other people. Nope. I still have no idea if I'm even remotely saying that name right. BKK. Yeah. Okay, everyone's still talking about Star Trek because I keep on bringing it up. Ah, I'm glad you like this sweater turtleneck that I'm wearing. I was hesitant, actually, to wear turtleneck. I like them, but it doesn't do it. It really shows off my under chin. Let's put it that way. Okay, let's get back into some, just cruddy news up here in Canada. So let's just checking the tabs up here. The majority of the rest of the news is all Canadian based, which I get a monopoly on up here in Canada because all the other leftist Canadian content creators tend to focus on the States, which is fine for me because I like having my niche. That said,
Today in Canadian news.
I get to use that fun little bumper. I like it. But I still sometimes worry about using that when I'm about to launch into like horrible news. Because, yeah, horrible news is a thing here in Canada. Let's see if can I make that bigger? Nope, one size smaller. There we go. Anyway, healthcare in Canada is still on the verge of, collapse and crumbling. And, you know, as I say, the universal healthcare system in Canada is great if you're a healthy person. If you have chronic illness, a sudden illness, that sort of thing, the Canadian healthcare system is very not good. And, it's also great if you get into an accident and there's actually room in the emergency room for you. Because then you get seen, like, there's pros and cons. every time I've needed to go to emerge, I was eventually seen. Sometimes I had to wait 6 hours. And there have been times where my life was in jeopardy and I've been in the emergency room and I had been seen. And sometimes I would get an ultrasound. Like one time I got an ultrasound right there and then, still had to wait 4 hours for it, but still I got it done. And all of these times it didn't cost me a thing. So it's great healthcare when you can get it. Unfortunately, it's when you can get it now because wait times are falling apart. Hospital staff leaving in droves. ERs are shutting down. It's scary times, and it's not going to look exactly like what the United States has at this point. It's going to be its own unique horror show, I think. I don't like for it to be privatized the same way as in the States. I don't think it will happen that way. But it's still going to happen to the point where it's like one system may not be better than the other. Like right now, I still much prefer the Canadian system over the American system. Much, much prefer it. That's it. Let's get into it. This newborn waited 5 hours for a doctor. Experts say Ontario ER wait times have never been worse. When Joey took his newborn into an Ontario emergency room in late December, he didn't expect to wait 5 hours to be seen by a doctor and 8 hours to be admitted to the hospital. Joey says it took an hour for his son, who had a fever and was only 2.5 weeks old at the time, just to be assessed by a triage nurse at the hospital north of Toronto on December 30th. The biggest thing and most upsetting thing is the fact that this just is commonplace, said Joey. Joey says his son was discharged January 2nd and is now healthy and at home, so thank goodness for that. But according to Dr. Ragu, yeah, an emergency physician who works in 3 Toronto hospitals, an 8-hour wait time shatters any notion of what is acceptable in medical care in Canada. He says a child with a fever could have sepsis, a serious condition which the immune system has extreme response to an infection, and should have been seen by a physician within 15 to 30 minutes. The doctor doesn't blame is it the doctor? Yeah. The doctor doesn't blame emergency room staff, but says the worsening trend of chronically strained Ontario hospitals is making it nearly impossible to meet national Canadian healthcare standards. As a nation, we are failing children, women, seniors, regular patients with this kind of situation. He says the lack of available emergency and non-emergency hospital beds, systemic staffing shortages, worsening vaccine uptake and respiratory hygiene in Ontario population, and a shortage of primary care physicians are putting pressure on an already strained system. Yeah, it is. I'm not going to go over the whole article. It is a long article. Let's just see. Province incentivizing ERs that reduce wait times. In an email statement to CBC News spokesperson, the Minister of Health said it added $44 million to an annual $90 million investment that rewards emergency departments for innovative solutions to reduce emergency wait times. That's not necessarily a good thing. It might mean that doctors then start cutting corners and discharging people that maybe shouldn't have been discharged, or not doing there's no way that should be a thing under the current system. Let's put it that way. We should have shorter times because they hire more staff and have more beds available. That's the only reason why there should be shorter wait times, not because doctors find innovative ways of getting rid of people from the emergency room faster. Ministry of Health says it's also working to make it easier for internationally and interprovincially education healthcare workers to register and practice in Ontario, and removing financial barriers for nurses wanting to learn the skills necessary to work in critical care areas of hospitals. Yeah, see, it's not so much that we don't have enough nurses, it's that the system treats them so horribly they leave. Like, we can easily get enough people educated in this province have enough medical staff in this province. The problem is retention. The problem is actually keeping them in the public care system, because a lot of them are also moving to the private care system because it pays more. Many in healthcare industries say hospital workers are facing historic burnout. Like, that's the problem, is that we don't have enough, because why would anyone want to go into healthcare work right now in Ontario with the conditions the way that they are? Yeah, nearly 70% of workers polled across Ontario say there are not enough staff to deliver high quality patient care. Hospital workers face burnout, says the union. Over 6 in 10 responded that they are exhausted, while 2 in 5 say they dread going into work and are contemplating leaving their position. The union is calling for an injection of funding into the province's healthcare system to help curtail the staffing crisis. Says it wants the province to invest $1.25 billion annually over the next 4 years on top of inflation. Yeah. It's horrible, horrible. And it's not just Ontario that's in a horrid situation. This on Twitter. So, somebody just responding to the fact that, clickbait journalism, it has to be the least important issue of the day rather than discussing challenges in healthcare, housing, and wealth inequality. They spend the show talking about vacations at a friend's home. So yes, Justin Trudeau went on vacation that he maybe didn't pay for or something like that, and that was blowing up all over mainstream media here in Canada. Whereas people are trying to point out exactly the ER in Red Deer has to build an addition with duct tape and tarps thanks to the UCP, and I'm supposed to be outraged that the PM took a vacation at a friend's home. Get real. I don't know much about the Prime Minister's vacation. Yes, he's entitled to them. If he crosses lines when it comes to accepting gifts, blah, 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 fine, take it up with them. But yeah, we have far more critical issues that should be in the news right now. And here is one of the only articles I could find on it. So for those of you who don't know, Red Deer is in Alberta. And I am going to do a quick little fix of my monitor because I don't like how it looks right now. So I'm just going to do this and then, oh, no, sorry. I got a little particular with things. No, go back here, go back here. You see, I see a tiny, tiny white line at the top and it's driving me crazy. Oops. Nope, it's still there. And I have to do this in OBS, and it's difficult at times because it's like there's 20 different things that it's trying to do, and yeah. Oh, there we go. Did I get rid of the tiny white line? I got rid of the tiny white line. Okay. Sorry, it was bugging me, and I kept on forgetting to fix it while I was not on stream, and then I just saw it one time too many. I'm like, okay, I gotta fix that now. And I don't even know if any of you even saw or noticed the difference to what I did, but I'm much happier now that, a white line of like 2 pixels thick is now gone from the top. Anyway, back to the horrible news story from Red Deer, Alberta. Red Deer ER uses tarps secured with duct tape to create more space for patients. Makeshift treatment space using tarps held up with duct tape have been the only option available for some patients waiting to consult with a doctor at Red Deer's Hospital Emergency Department. This person, I think last name is Tweedle, said after arriving at 3:30 a.m. on December 21st and waiting about 5 hours in the waiting room, she was moved into one of the improvised spaces in the department's overcrowded treatment area. There were metal posts set up with tarps across and duct tape to make all these extra little stalls Tweedle said. There were 3 chairs where she sat with another patient in a small stall about 1.8 by 1.8 meters in size and waited to see the only doctor working in the department. To me, it feels like things are at a breaking point, but you don't want to say that because it can always get worse. Tweedle said, no, we need to say that. Yes, it can get worse, and that's why we need to say that it's at a breaking point. You want to say that now before it does reach that breaking point. It's good to say our healthcare sucks now because we know it can get worse and we don't want it to get worse. Alberta Health Services says that due to respiratory illness season, Red Deer Regional Hospital Center's emergency department continues to see high patient volumes, which is not usual at this time of year because people have stopped taking COVID seriously. The government has stopped taking COVID seriously. So there's been an uptick in respiratory illnesses because it used to be, what was it, like 60 people a day were dying of the flu, but you still have like 200 people in the States dying of COVID every day. So on top of our regular flu seasons that we have, we now have COVID seasons, which is a lot higher and put a lot more strain. And, our hospitals haven't kept up to pace with it. It's like respiratory inflation, and they haven't kept up with it in their services and departments. And in fact, a lot of them have received funding cuts. So none of the hospitals are equipped to deal with the issues of today. In order to provide patients with some privacy during their visit to the emergency department, some temporary mobile dividers have been erected where needed. Yes, the privacy of having a tarp in between you and the person next to you. Not to mention, we're talking outside in Alberta in the winter. Like, granted, our winters are not what they used to be, but that's not healthy. Like, that's not healthy either, because it can still get cold. Even though it's not our typically cold winters right now, it's still cold. These temporary dividers also help limit transmission of respiratory illness. More permanent dividers are on order and will be installed in the ED in the coming days. Let's see. Yeah. Tweedle said she was incredibly grateful to the staff committed to providing care under conditions that are unfair to patients and staff. I feel like the only thing we have going at this point is their absolute commitment to doing their jobs, she said about the staff and how she saw being run off their feet. Yeah, it'd be nice if they were actually paid their worth then and, given more time off because there was more doctors and staff available so they weren't so stressed, so that they could give quality care to everyone in a timely manner indoors. She worried pushing staff to the point of burnout will mean that that one thread we're hanging onto is gone. Tweedle, who ran for the Alberta NDP in 2023 provincial election, said since she was sitting right next to another patient, she heard the doctor say the patient's large kidney stone was confirmed by an ultrasound, but there was little hope of getting surgery done. Oh, great. The doctor said at that point, I have few patients upstairs in a ward in hospital for over a week just waiting for the procedure to be done. We don't have the manpower to do it. Sure, you can sit around with a large kidney stone. I don't see a problem with that at all. It's not fatal as far as I know. I've never had a kidney stone. I wouldn't know. I've heard really horrible things about it. But yeah, that's the thing. If it's not going to kill you, then fine, you don't get treatment for it. Alberta NDP said it continues to hear repeated stories of long wait times, short staffing, staff burnouts, and more. Daniel Smith in the UCP, that's the Conservative Party, United Conservative Party of Alberta, promised to end this crisis more than a year ago, but we fear it may actually be worsening, said the NDP in the statement, the official opposition in Alberta. New Democrat Party. We continue to demand a real plan to support public health care workers and to recruit more workers. We believe all Albertans deserve access to public health care and when and where they need it and free of charge. Tweedle, who spent about 12 hours in the emergency department, said health professionals on the front line need to be heard and shown more respect. And more money needs to be invested in healthcare. We are a terribly rich province. We currently sitting on over 5 billion surplus, so it's not that the funds are not there. Same in Toronto, in Ontario. We have funds that we could be putting towards healthcare. Some of those funds are being redirected into the private healthcare sector as opposed to the public healthcare sector. And again, that's the conservative leaders doing this on purpose to cripple that public healthcare system, to make it broken. The problem is that when the Liberal parties get into power, they don't exactly do much to reverse the damage. They'll reverse a couple of the things to say, look, see, we're better, but they have lots of austerity politics too when it comes to healthcare systems. I've talked about my story of my grandmother in the long-term care home before, and the horrid conditions she was in before she passed away in the home, and why she passed away in the home. And that was while the Liberals were in power. And that's the conditions that led to that. So it is the Liberals, they'll fix a couple things just to say, see, we're better, but they don't make the system better overall. So we have polls suggest 40% of Ontario hospital workers consider quitting. Union calls on province to address staffing crisis. Union representing thousands of healthcare workers say the Ford government needs to do more in addressing staffing crisis. Yeah, the numbers come from a new Nano survey, which suggests 41% of the province's hospital staff say they dread going to work, with 43% saying that they are considering a new career path. The Canadian Union of Public Employees, CUPE, the union representing some healthcare workers in Ontario, says the data points to a staffing crisis that could only get worse if the province doesn't step in. And of course, everything Doug Ford does made it worse. Like the legislation he passed, the fact that he capped their wage increases at 1% a year, it is just, Doug Ford has been making it so much worse. And yet he still will claim, oh, we're the best. Relatively speaking, we might have shorter wait times than the other provinces, but it's still getting worse. Like, it's still getting substantially worse here. And wait times should be improving, not getting worse. That would be a good gauge if you're doing this well, would be if they're improving. Okay. So, yeah, just those tidbits of news when it comes to the healthcare system in Canada. Before we get on to the next subject at hand, let's go back to the sandbox and see what people are chatting about. Grand Theft Autobot, still trying to figure out what that episode is. Here's the thing for everyone who has not guessed it, the episode that makes me cry. When you find out which episode it is, you'll be like, oh, yeah, that one, that one, that one. Hello, MIDI doctors. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Grand Theft Autobot. Yeah, thanks, Ford. So Life posted a link and wondering if it is clickable. I have no idea because I don't see it. So my guess is it's not clickable. I don't know what the rules are per se with links and stuff. Like, you're a mod, so I would imagine you could post links, but it could just depend on which link you're posting. I don't know. My dogs are goth. Red Deer is 80 minutes from me. Oh, so it's like a neighbor, like in Canada standards. It's like, oh yeah, you can just go there for lunch some days. Yeah, in Canada, we're so spread out. that it's not uncommon to be like, oh, there's this restaurant I really want to go to. We just have to drive an hour to get there and have dinner and then drive all the way back. But that's par for the course. It's not that uncommon. It's kind of like, David Dole from the Rational National. I consider him, he's like practically a next door neighbor to me, even though we're in completely different cities and an hour's drive apart. But it's like, no, we're practically next door neighbors in Canada standards. Uh, my dogs are goth. Red Deer, for the most part, votes UCP, so hopefully they won't next time. It depends on how many healthy people are in Red Deer, what it comes down to. Because the conservatives in Alberta are very good at fear-mongering about, carbon tax type stuff and all the conservative tropes. And a lot of people buy into it because everyone keeps on seeing their quality of life decreasing. And, the conservative leaders give them, like, these are the reasons you're being hurt through this tax or this and that and the other thing. But they don't seem to understand that it doesn't matter if it's the liberal or conservative governments in power, we're still seeing a decrease in quality of life because it's the system. It's the system designed to make us, suffer. And it's going to take far more pushback by people power to change the system. I know they were talking about it a lot in the Majority Report recently. For me, elections are harm reduction. I still vote, I would still encourage people to vote for the party that will do the least amount of damage. Yeah, I'll vote shame. I'll vote shame, especially here in Ontario, where only 18% of possible voters elected Doug Ford in for his second term. And because of that, the amount of damage that's happening to this province, to people, is astronomically high. So yeah, I do vote shame. Because I'm one of the people that it's like, okay, this impacts me personally. And it shouldn't have to impact you personally to understand that people living with disabilities are suffering exponentially worse than a lot of other people in this province across the country because our rates aren't being raised and stuff. And there was a very strong possibility that if the NDP had gotten in or if the Greens had gotten in, our rates would have been doubled. Because the NDP at first was only saying that they would raise it by 20%, but then through pressure and the Greens actually saying that they would double it, then the NDP, the provincial NDP, said, yeah, okay, we'll double it as well. There are policies that they would have put in place that would have made the quality of lives of some people survivable, like just survivable. But because we got another conservative Doug Ford government in, there are people who will not survive until the next term. So yeah, I vote shame. I vote shame. Because you shouldn't have to be in that situation to not recognize the amount of damage that the conservative parties do here in Canada. Because it's not just, it's all marginalized groups that suffer exponentially worse. And, even if it is a party, the least worst is maintaining the status quo, then we need to maintain the status quo if that's the least worst option. Because, they were talking, some people are talking about it, the whole, what is it? When it gets to the point that it's so bad and broken, then, people will then be motivated to the like accelerationist type thing, or, if we get Donald Trump in again, then that will kick people into gear to actually fight back and do things and blah, 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 blah. And here's the problem with a lot of that thinking is a lot of people are just struggling to tread water and keep our heads above the water. And while we're busy doing that, we cannot do anything else. Like we're just incapable of doing anything else. Whereas if we got a government in that maybe doesn't markedly improve our lives or anything, but gets it to the point where we can at least float, where we can swim, then we actually have the energy and the ability to fight back. So no, people don't like Joe Biden. But if Donald Trump gets back into power, it's not going to be about improving the situation. It's going to be about preventing as much destruction as possible when he's in. Whereas with Joe Biden, you can at least push to improve the system. And the same goes here in Canada. I don't want to see Justin Trudeau as the next, like, to maintain being prime minister. I think he is a horrible prime minister, very full of himself, arrogant, privileged, all of that. I'd rather see him in than Pierre Poilievre. Because at least with Justin Trudeau, my primary focus isn't trying to stop this country from deteriorating even further. And we actually have the energy to push back. It's that type of, you understand this dynamic when you live it. Because you have people living in dire poverty, people living with disabilities, who don't have the ability to advocate for themselves, to fight back, because every day is a constant struggle of how are you going to eat? How are you going to pay your bills? How are you going to pay for rent? And with those being your primary focus, you can't focus on changing the system that has put you in that situation in the first place, as much as you would want to. But if you can't eat, if you can't have a place to sleep at night, those take your focus. And so, do I have faith that the NDP would have been much better here? They would have been better. Like, if they had doubled our rates, then I wouldn't necessarily be worried about the next time I have to go to get groceries. And I could focus more of my attention on, okay, so what do we do next? Now that I'm not so stressed out constantly about how I'm just going to eat. The time when I was able to become fully active in the community, to have the energy to run for office, to, I started volunteering with a whole bunch of different organizations and really started to make a presence here in my community, was when I had a secure job and I didn't have to worry about those things. It was then that I had the strength to say, you know what, I can run for office. I can do these things. I can get involved with these community organizations. I can go to these protests. I can go to these rallies. I can learn more about what's happening in this country. And I think the situation is the same for a lot of other people. And so, like, even the people in Red Deer, like, if their situation is so dire that they're just struggling to survive, they're not looking into the nuance of what the governments are doing. They're just busy trying to survive. Let's check in the sandbox. Oh, people getting power outages. Good for Gabby. Power back on now that I have all flashing flashlights and candles set up. Christy said, I'm sitting in my ice cold house with my coat and hat with no electric and no heat. High winds took out the block. Feel bad for me. I can't stay long because I don't want my phone to die. But hey, you all. Oh, so sorry to hear that, Christy. I hope your power gets turned on again soon. I used to have a pet lizard, actually, and I was always in the winter terrified of the power going out because that would kill him. Because you needed the heat lamps and stuff of that sort. But that's another problem with climate change in the winter and even in the summer. When power outages happen, more people will die because in the winter it's the cold and that's always been an issue. But in the summer now it's going to be lack of air conditioning will then start killing people. So it is like I remember there was that big ice storm that hit Montreal and they were out for a long, long time in ice cold temperatures. Like it's just Hello, James Fox, saying just seen y'all up over here and thought I'd stop by and say hi. Well, hello. Good for Gabby. Sorry to hear about your grandmother, Sandy. The state of elderly care is horrible. Yeah. I've talked about it before on stream. It, yeah, what she went through in the last few months of her life, well, last few years of her life, were pretty bad. BKK, that's strategic too, Sandy. We're too tired to fight. Yeah. It's, yeah. No, I have shamed people for not coming out in the last Ontario election, and I'll do it again. I will absolutely do it again. I'm not against vote shaming. Like, I understand there's the people who will go out and vote because they've been misled and brainwashed and stuff like that. That I can at least understand. It's all the people who just say, I don't care, nothing is ever going to change. Those are the people I get after. Those are the people that's like, who have the ability to actually know what's going on, who just disengage. Those are the people I get really pissed with because the largest voting bloc are the non-voters. And so it's like the people who just don't bother to get engaged and find out what's happening, those are the people that I get really pissed off with. I have a certain level of sympathy for people who are so brainwashed by the right that they're living in a constant state of fear that their lives will be over and stuff like that. But at some point, I only cut them a certain amount of leeway. If they get exposed to accurate, proper information and they're still stuck that way, then my sympathy for them is gone. But I always want to try to make sure there's a bridge so that there's a way for some of them to get out of that mindset. We should be encouraging people that are center and right leaning to, become more progressive. That's part of the goal. Good for Gatsby. Yep, I'm treading water. I feel it. Kelly Bach, agree. I am on disability, fighting cancer. At least I was able to get on disability approved. Yeah. I hope you beat the cancer. Shamigli, there are plenty of valid reasons to criticize Trudeau besides rainbow socks, kindergarten teacher, dictator, so that means reactionaries have nothing substantial. Yeah, there is plenty of reasons to criticize Trudeau, and I do. Shamigli BKK, I wasn't really prepared for how the culture war stuff sprouted in Canada so easily. I'm not surprised. Not really. I've had family that's leaned more conservative most of my life, but ones that were like, if it directly affected them, they could at least be like, oh, well, that's okay, or this is okay and stuff. People who were still good intentioned, but, hated taxes, that sort of thing. But when I visited Alberta for my father's funeral and burial and was interacting with my family out there and seeing the attitude out there, I'm like, I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised. And it's not just Alberta. Like, I pick on Alberta for being racist at AF, but it's not just Alberta because there are plenty of places in Ontario that are just as bad. Da, 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 da. Okay, let's get back to it. Already going over an hour. I was going to get done by like now. We'll get into some more Canadian news. And I always worry about showing, even though they're on YouTube and it should be fair use, I always get really nervous about sharing Canadian news videos because they're so particular up here. So I will risk this one, but I'll pause frequently just to be safer because it should be fair use. Should be. And what do I have the speed at? Let's put the speed to there. And then hopefully this will be good enough. Okay.
After a fire tore through a tent encampment in New Brunswick, crews called. One man has died after a fire tore through a tent encampment in New Brunswick. Crews called to the scene along a St. John roadway on Saturday night. Brett Ruskin has the latest developments. He's live in Halifax this morning. This fire, Brett, now fatal. Tell us about the incident and the man who's died.
Yeah, they use the excuse of, these encampments being fire traps. And I get it because as to why they should be dismantled. And I get it. They are. Because people have the audacity of wanting, warmth and cooked food in the middle of winter is the problem. So, instead of making sure that they have safe places to go and warm places to go, they'd just rather dismantle these encampments. And unfortunately, there's all sorts of news stories out there of unhoused folks in these encampments who perish in these fires.
Heather, we know that it started around 8 o'clock on Saturday evening, and it was in an encampment. As you mentioned, there were tents and makeshift housing arrangements there that people had built up. We know based on witness statements and witness accounts that this 44-year-old man was pulled from this burning area. Also from witness statements that there were people yelling for help, crying for help. So the fire team was called in, firefighters were called in to try to put out the blaze. We now know that this 40.
Like, this is just devastating on so many levels. Like, not to mention, okay, somebody lost their life, and that is horrible, horrible. But it's also, again, part of the reason why when encampments are dismantled by the police, a lot of the times their possessions and belongings are thrown out. So now a lot of people have also lost all of their possessions. And I'll keep on repeating it. When you're unhoused, the things you keep with you are things that you need for immediate survival or things that have such strong, important value, like sentimental value to you, that you're willing to carry it with you. And it could be pictures of loved ones, a jacket that was given to you as a gift, all that sort of stuff. And all of it is gone. All of their possessions are gone as well. And so they have to start, building back up from scratch and getting supplies and stuff. But again, to go where? There should be no encampments in this country. None. There's more than enough housing available. And it's just, these types of scenes should never be happening because encampments shouldn't need to exist.
34-year-old man, according to St. John police in a statement, say that he was transferred to hospital in St. John and then transferred again to hospital outside of the province, likely here to Nova Scotia, where he was pronounced dead as a result of his injuries from the fire. Now, we do know that it was in a relatively busy area of St. John, so there were witnesses and witness accounts. Here's one of those witnesses talking about what he saw.
Yeah, it is just, and a lot of the problem too is a lot of these encampments, you know, they can be secluded away from people. So it can be longer for them to get help if they don't have access to cell phones. Some people who are unhoused have cell phones, others don't. Calling for help can be a bit of a challenge. There's so much that goes into it that makes this difficult.
Flames were 20 feet high. There seemed to be something that was keeping it going. A lot of firemen, there was a lot of...
Look at that. Like, that is just brutal.
Fire trucks, there was ambulance, 2 or 3 police cars. There was a lot of equipment here.
And now, as for what may have been keeping it going, fire crews were able to find cooking equipment as well as propane tanks after the blaze was put out, but that also hampered and made it more difficult to fight this fire. And again, the investigation into this blaze is still ongoing. Heather.
Yeah, because people are left with little options. You know, if you want to survive the winters, if you want to survive the cold, how are you going to heat yourself in these encampments? How are you going to cook food in these encampments? Because that's a large problem with like people who live in encampments and some people who live in really crappy apartment buildings. The food that you get at food banks need to be cooked. You know, canned foods, things of that sort. There's very few places you can go to get a pre-made meal where all you have to do is eat it. And even some pre-made meals still need to be heated up if you want to have any sort of level of like enjoyment to eating it. And a lot of people, they just don't seem to understand this. They don't seem to understand, you know, because they think to themselves, well, there's food banks and people can get this stuff. But where are they going to store it? How are they going to cook it? And I say like some people with really crappy apartments because I know some people who may only have access to a microwave if they're lucky. They don't have a fridge. They don't have a stove. So if they go to the food bank and get food, what are they supposed to do? You know, and then some people are just left to, you know, open that can of beans and eat it cold because there's no other option.
So we're about 48 hours after the incident now, Brett. What happens to the site and especially what happens to the people who live there?
Yeah, well, housing advocates and volunteers are trying to find temporary housing for these folks who were already having difficulty finding housing. So the people who were living in this tent encampment, this temporary housing encampment, have to move someplace else. Obviously a difficult task when housing is at such a shortage in St. John as well as all across the country, really. Now, as for the fire investigation, that site police and fire investigators are still on scene trying to determine exactly what the cause of the fire was and any details. And police in St. John are asking anyone with information about the fire. They may have seen something driving past or living nearby, or maybe were at the fire, to then contact St. John Police. Heather.
You can see another article up here too saying some Edmonton encampment residents refused to leave site. Want to click on it? I'm worried about Canadian news sources, but I am curious because this might lead into my next story as well. I haven't seen this one yet.
This is
And I've gone, again, on my channel, I've gone over why people don't want to leave encampments. And the people who live in them, they're choosing the best of the option that will cause the least amount of harm. Some places don't have safe shelter spaces for them to go to. So what other options are there? If they're in an encampment, they have community, they have some level of protection, they have some level of safety. You know, if something were to happen to them, then there's somebody right near them that can help them out potentially. You know, there's actually a lot of benefits for people living in these encampments that they don't get from shelters. Shelters also restrict what you can bring with you into a shelter. So a lot of your belongings might have to go out on the curb. If you have a pet, if you're in a couple, like a relationship, you might get separated because a lot of shelters are segregated by gender. Like there's so many reasons why shelters are not necessarily good options.
encampment that's just off downtown Edmonton. Now, it's been here for about 4 to 5 months, and there's around a dozen people that have been living here during that time. It's actually the 8th encampment that was about to be cleared by the city of Edmonton over the past 2 to 3 weeks. This one's went down a little differently. Let's take a look here as police have come here this morning and been around talking.
There's so many people I've heard that say, well, people just prefer this lifestyle. They just choose to live like this. Like they're choosing to be homeless because they're lazy and stuff like that. You look at this scene and tell me who is choosing this option if they have something better. To be in these structures here in the middle of winter in Edmonton if they have a better option somewhere else. Okay? Like people do not choose to live like this. And the same goes in the summer when we had like a week of over 30 degrees plus Celsius temperatures and there's an encampment and everyone is hot and sick and gross because, you know, they don't have access to showers and stuff necessarily too. Nobody is choosing that if they have an option to go anywhere else better.
Residents, because they were planning to come in and clear this one. Basically, this is deemed high risk by the city of Edmonton, and they've had crews on hand ready to clear this. They just started moving in, kind of cleaning up garbage, any tanks, anything they seem unsafe right there. And this one went down differently than the other encampments. Where those other ones, police just moved in, would get people to move and say whatever's left behind, city crews are going to be tossing it out. Well, one resident here.
How are you supposed to move everything? Like, what, with your truck that you happen to have? Like, that's the thing. Like, you're told that you have to leave, but they can't physically carry all of their belongings. So what choice do they have other than to leave it or risk getting arrested or something of that sort? Like, it's just because it's not like the city is giving them help to relocate to another location because they don't want them to relocate. They just want them to disappear.
Actually told Edmonton police he wasn't leaving, and other residents decided the same thing. He's been negotiating a little bit more with them. Here's one thing that's a little different. We've got a bus over here. Residents from this camp have been getting on there and warming up. In the meantime, there's been city crews and police. Police are kind of watching here, as you can see, and then city crews are coming up and cleaning up any of that trash and things they deem to be unsafe. So this one's gone down a little differently as well. This was challenged in court, the clearing here, today by the lawyers of the Coalition for Justice and Human Rights. It was unsuccessful, but there's a main court challenge. It was made months ago, and that's going to be heard in court on Thursday. Travis McEwen, CBC News, Edmonton.
And speaking of these clearings that they're happening, now to Vancouver, the most expensive city to live in Canada, I believe it is. And this is on Twitter, Stop the Sweeps Vancouver. So apparently our friend packed down his tent, was complying with the bylaw, and they still stole his belongings.
Back it down. You have to back up. You can film back there. In the computer space. You can film. No. Guys, we know. No. This was packed down to be compliant. Pack this down. This is fully packed down. Do not take this stuff. Do not take this stuff. You know who this person's stuff is. Back up. Who this person's stuff is. This is someone's. No. You can't touch it. You can film. We talked about this.
One of the hard things about living in a shelter or living in poverty or an encampment like this is that you do have an absolute loss of personal autonomy. The police can just come, steal your belongings, and throw them out. When I was in the shelter, I suddenly had a curfew. At my age, I was in my early 20s, but I had a curfew. And at any time, day or night, and sometimes in the night, they could open up my door, check if I was still there, go through my belongings. Like, you lose all sense of self because it gets taken away from you when you're in these positions. And, even apparently, if you're doing what you're told it's still not good enough for the police. And so 211 confirms not enough shelter space to accommodate Oppenheimer residents being decamped. And the police just taking it away, throwing it out. And this was all just happening today. Just all of their belongings taken, thrown out. And this is where we get into my next subject of the state of Canada's police state. Because that is one example of what the police do in this country. They often traumatize the communities they're supposed to protect. And there's been much, much more vicious examples of this. So before we get into the news of this, I'll quickly go and check the sandbox. Good for Gabby. Thank you so much for the $9.99. I really, really appreciate it. And it comes with, I guess, are those, oh, it's the 20th celebration one. 20th super on a live stream. Cool. And it comes with a little funky graphic. Grand Theft Autobot, don't know if it's still the case, but one shelter I remember going to would lock the doors at a certain time to force all the needy people to listen to a sermon before eating. Ugh. No, I remember one shelter I was in, basically they would wake you all up at the same time in the morning and they would kick you out and you weren't allowed back until 6 p.m. So you'd get kicked out at 9 a.m. So they'd wake you up at 8, kick you out at 9, and you weren't allowed back at 6 p.m., but you had to be back. Or it was, you weren't allowed back until 4 p.m., but you had to be back by 6 p.m. Like those were rules that you had to have. And then you weren't allowed to leave the premises unless you had school or a job. Those were the only reasons why you didn't have to be back. And so, you know, for the day, like, where are you supposed to go? James Fox, literally millions of homes empty due to 2008 still. There's a reason, but it isn't because of the homeless. Yeah. In Canada, there's about 6 empty homes for every unhoused person. We have the shelter. We have it. Okay. My dogs are goth. 6 p.m. That's an elementary kid's curfew. Yeah. Well, you had to be there for dinner. And I remember some of the most absurd things that would happen is that, you know, you had your privileged rich people or something thinking that they were doing some sort of charity act by donating something to the local shelters that you normally wouldn't get, like escargot ones. And I'm like, ew. That was once an option. Yeah, you had to be back for dinner. And then you had to stay there for the rest of the evening so that you're not up doing bad things, you know, getting out into trouble or something. It's just, yeah, you lose so much of your autonomy. People suddenly don't trust you. Everything you say is a lie, even though before then, you were fine, you know, and then you had to be in bed by 10, lights out type thing. It's ridiculous. And even though I was in a youth shelter, we're still talking, it was people between the ages of 16 and 24. Like, it's just, okay, so now we're going to get into the next part of the police state. Here, the state of Canada's police state in Canada. And this is so wild. But the police have actually apologized for something so egregious. They have apologized. Like after what you just saw, like the encampment being deconstructed or decamped, as they said in the video. You know, that they don't apologize for, but something so egregious happened that they had to apologize. So egregious. Chief apologizes after video of cops carrying coffee at a protest sparks outrage. Yeah, so Toronto's police chief is apologizing after officers were filmed bringing coffee and donuts to protesters at a pro-Palestinian demonstration over the weekend. That's what they apologized for. You see, it's not like the police even bought this. It was, they were preventing other protesters from joining the main group. And the other protesters were bringing coffee and donuts. And so then the police just basically said, okay, fine, you're not allowed to join, but we'll at least carry these over for you. So they did like just the most minute monicum of something decent. And they're apologizing for doing something that was decent. I didn't even show you the headline. Here you go. So imagine everything I just said while you're looking at this. I did like such a brilliant like lead into that and everything. I forgot to click the button. Yes, police chief apologizes after video of cops carrying coffee at protests sparks outrage. With it on screen so you can see what I'm talking about. Pro-Palestinian protesters have been demonstrating at the Avenue Road overpass on Highway 401 for several weeks, sometimes clashing with pro-Israel counter-demonstrators. Video shared with CP24 by a lawyer who was at the protest on January 6 shows officers bringing Tim Hortons coffee and donuts to protesters on the bridge. In the video, the protester who is handed the coffee says the police were preventing more protesters from joining the demonstration on the overpass, but agreed to carry over the refreshments which had been bought for them. The coffee was bought for us, but the police won't let them in, so the police are now becoming our little messengers between us, he said. Images of the officers handing the protesters coffee sparked outrage online. How dare they do that? Here's an idea. How about not delivering coffee to protesters who are disturbing traffic and blocking the bridge, one person said on X. So, like, here's the thing. People are upset over this, but the cops who are actually supporting, funding, and practically participating with the Freedom Convoy in Ottawa, that was fine. But because they're pro-Palestinian protesters and the cops are just handing over the refreshments that have been bought for them because they did that most minuscule level of decent thing to do, they apologized for being almost human. The overpass is located in a predominantly Jewish neighborhood, and area residents have said they feel the protests are aimed in part at intimidating them. If people, you know, protesting the genocide that's happening in Gaza, if you're feeling intimidated by people saying that that should stop, maybe you should, reassess your worldviews, you know, because that's all they're doing is saying, stop genocide type thing. And if you're uncomfortable with that phrase, then maybe the problem is you. In a statement issued by Chief Myron Myron didn't specifically reference the coffee, but said questions have been raised about one particular interaction between officers and a protester on the bridge. Whatever the incident, the impact has been to cause concern and confusion, and for that, I am sorry. Sorry. The chief said, I immediately convened command meetings and ordered a thorough review of the day's events to ensure that the most effective operational planning and response are in place. I reviewed this to make sure we never act decent again towards protesters. At least, the protesters we don't agree with. The chief added, let me be clear and unequivocal. Our commitment to keeping our city's Jewish community safe is unwavering. We are doing everything we can in the locations that have been targeted for demonstrations to uphold and enforce the law. Yeah, because, handing that coffee over to the protesters, that's not keeping the Jewish community safe there. That's not. That goes against keeping them safe. Toronto police have said in the past that while they will protect... is that the one that I read? No. Okay. Toronto police have said that in the past, while they will protect the right of people to demonstrate in public, they will not allow protests around crucial infrastructure such as highways. It's not entirely clear why the overpass protests have been allowed to continue. In a separate incident Sunday, Mayor Olivia Chow's New Year's Eve levy escaped her. Okay, yeah, so she had a very similar incident to what happened to Joe Biden recently, where a whole bunch of protesters were just saying, stop the genocide. and she just said, yeah, I've already said my thing on that, so stop bugging me, is pretty much what she said to that. But let's just scooch over to here. Did this save where I wanted it to?
Toronto Police Chief.
I wanted to go to this part here. So you can see, let's go to this setting here. Yeah, there's the video of the police just kind of going over and handing off the coffee and donuts, but I wanted to scooch to this guy.
It's like the police are supporting.
My lawyer, Karma Sad, happened at a protest on the Avenue Road Highway overpass on Saturday.
Chief apologizes
like
over
the
video.
Police are supporting these protesters, and obviously they're not. But some
obviously they're not supporting pro-Palestinian protesters. Like, please do not get that confused. We don't want people thinking that. No, not supporting pro-Palestinian protesters. It's not like they're the Freedom Convoy. Like, get real.
Officer made a decision at the scene while trying to de-escalate a very difficult situation to just take coffee from someone they weren't allowing in and turn and hand it to those that were in. You know what? It's not a big deal, but I get the concern. And so the chief has handled it well. They're going to review it. I'm sure the officer didn't mean to cause an uproar.
Yesterday, Chief Demke released a statement which reads in part, let me be clear and unequivocal. Our commitment to keeping our city's Jewish community safe is unwavering. We are doing everything we can in locations that have been targeted for demonstration to uphold and enforce the law.
Yeah. So that, you see, that really kind of got me upset, because the idea of police not traumatizing the protesters for, doing their job in a way that wasn't harming, that was such a big no-no. It actually caused them to apologize. You see, they won't apologize for doing this. They won't apologize for this. And they certainly haven't apologized for this. But they will apologize for doing this. Are you fucking kidding me? Like, just again, you see, there was no apology for this. This was, during an encampment destruction in Toronto. Toronto police, they didn't apologize for that. Or this. Or this. They didn't apologize for those. But they're apologizing for this. I got so mad at that. Just the idea that for once they do something that isn't horrible for a group that they don't necessarily agree with. And that brings them to the level of apologizing. But for all the harm they cause, the trauma, that they never apologize for. And that's the police state in Canada for you. Yeah. What more do you have to say to that? That totally blew my mind. That there was so much uproar over cops handing over coffee to protesters after denying other protesters from going there. But they don't apologize for actually sending money or supporting the protesters at the Freedom Convoy and all the support that they were giving there. They don't apologize for, all the harm that they've caused to, Black, Brown, and Indigenous peoples, to people living with disability, to people living with poverty. All of that they don't apologize for. Yeah, let's just go back here for a second. So, Chief apologizes after video of cops carrying coffee at protest sparks outrage. When is the last time Black, Indigenous, POC, 2S, LGBTQ+, or disabled folks got an apology from police regarding anything more serious than passing coffee from one party to the next? Says Joy Henderson on Twitter. And somebody replied to her saying, what if KKK showed up in your neighborhood, paraded in the streets under the police protection, and friends of the mob got to the police to pass them coffee and snacks? Reminder, Freedom Convoy. And Joy quote tweeted that person saying, imagine posting this to a Black and Indigenous person with your whole chest. Laugh my ass off. Oh, Michael, you never fail to entertain. Yeah. So when it was the Freedom Convoy, the police didn't actually have a problem supporting the protesters. When it was the anti-vaxxers, the police didn't have any problems making their lives easier. But they have absolutely harassed Black Lives Matter, people living with disabilities, people with poverty, all that sort of, those groups, they have no problem harassing them. I am absolutely shocked and astonished that they passed the coffee to a pro-Palestinian protest. That they actually did that. And then apologized for it. Wow. Believe it or not, that was the story that made me want to stream today. Oh, Canada. There's still more police shenanigans to come over before I move on. 2 more police-related stories. I'm covering a lot of police stuff here. Z-Myth. Have I mentioned ACAB yet? Apologizing for doing a good thing. Yes, no. They gotta apologize for doing something good. Yeah. Got a whole bunch of what the actual fuck's going on. Kelly Bach, yes, we are living in an upside down world. It gets more of the same. We'll get to those articles in just a second. So more police shenanigans. This time I'll remember to click on the article before I start referencing it. Well, first I need to do a proper lead into it, I guess. So up here in Canada, we have right-wing news media or media entertainment sources, and one of them is called Rebel News. They have troubles getting accreditation for going to things like debates and political functions and things of that sort. They've had to fight that in court. I don't consider them news. I don't. Very right-wing to the point that they'll even attack conservatives for not being right-wing enough. Just absolute, like those garbage rag magazines that you see on when you go to check out like tabloid type bullshit. Just a horrible organization. But they're very good at getting themselves noticed. And we have a media that goes along with it. Rebel News personality arrested after an encounter with Chrystia Freeland. Charges dropped after police found no credible security threat, York Regional Police say. Rebel News personality David Menzies was arrested Monday for allegedly assaulting a police officer while trying to ask Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland questions about the government's decision to leave the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps off the designated terrorist entity list. The website posted a video of Menzies briefly colliding with a police officer in Richmond Hill, Ontario, while trying to question Freeland about the organization at an event to mark the destruction of flight PS-752, a Ukrainian international airliner's jet that was destroyed by an Iranian military in January 2020, an attack that killed dozens of Canadians. The video of Monday's encounter appears to show an officer stepping into Menzies' path while the media personality was carrying his microphone in the parking lot of a suburban strip mall. That's very, the parking lot of a suburban strip mall. That's a very, I don't know, it's like, are you writing a novel where you want to put in those types of details? It seems odd that they would add that nuance. That officer subsequently grabbed Menzies by his lapels, pushed him against the wall, and accused him of assaulting while putting him under arrest. Police, you're under arrest for assault. You pushed me into me, sir, and unidentified officer said. Now, I understand a lot of people don't want to be sharing this, and I don't want to share the actual video because they don't want to prop up Rebel News because they're not really doing it in good faith. All I can say is his acting during this was pretty over the top. But even I can say from the video I saw, because I watched the video, the police were in the wrong. Menzies did not assault the police officers. There was no call to arrest him. And even though, you know, that is more or less what he wanted, Menzies wanted, because he likes the clout, he likes the coverage, the police were in the wrong. And I can say that because there's a lot of people saying, well, I don't care, they arrested a horrible person. No, because it goes to freedom of press, you know, regardless of what that press is. And we shouldn't be okay with the police using any reason whatsoever to arrest people. Because, yes, Menzies briefly collided into this plainclothes officer, so no indication on this person that he was an officer, as he was going past. It wasn't like he went out of his way to collide into this officer or anything. And he wasn't even identified as an officer at the time of the collision. So he said, I didn't touch a single person, Menzies said in response. And throughout the whole thing, you can hear him loudly saying, oh, woe is me, I'm being arrested for doing nothing. Like, just totally over the top. This is a trumped up charge of assault, folks. I didn't come here to cause any trouble. He absolutely did. Absolutely did. I came here to do my job, and now I'm handcuffed. This is your Canada now, folks. And this is in the video. This what I'm about to read is in the video. This is your Canada now, folks. This is the Gestapo taking blackface's orders. Menzies continued, an apparent reference to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, who also attended the event, who has also, there's photographs circulating of Justin Trudeau in blackface, and several times throughout that video, that's how Menzies referred to Justin Trudeau as the leader of the country. It was just showboating to the extreme. Menzies asked the officer for his name and badge number, but answers to those questions, if they were provided, were audible on the tape. The officer in that video was later identified. Blah, blah, blah. The arrest of Rebel News reporter was made by the Prime Minister's RCMP security detail. York Region police officers assisted in the interaction took place in our region, so on. And he was released shortly after, unconditionally, without any charges pressed or anything. So there have been previous run-ins with the police from this organization, from Menzies in particular. The finance minister ignored Menzies' questions and did not say anything as the arrest unfolded. Menzies is a provocative figure who has run-ins with the police and security services in the past, including an apprehension by Trudeau's protective detail at a Toronto event in 2021. By arresting him, not only should he not have been arrested in the first place, it actually helps his brand. It helps to give him media coverage, press. Like, this is mainstream media covering Rebel News and saying how unfairly treated he was. And yeah, he shouldn't have been arrested. And so this is the police just playing straight into Rebel News's hands by doing what they did. So maybe, I don't know, maybe that's why they did it. Menzies was also arrested in 2021 in an encounter with now Conservative Deputy Leader Melissa Lantsman in Thornhill. Lantsman, who is a lesbian, with now Conservative Deputy Leader Melissa Lantsman, who is a lesbian, says Menzies' questions became homophobic and related to my sexual orientation. Conservative Deputy Leader, really? Huh. Let's just Melissa Lantsman, a Canadian politician and stuff, and Lantsman is the first openly gay and first Jewish woman ever elected as a Conservative MP. Upon Pierre Poilievre's election as Conservative leader, he named Lantsman one of two deputy leaders, along with Edmonton MP Tin Uppal. So, of course, she can't do the job alone. She is still a woman, so she can't be deputy leader on her own. Okay, so what kind of person, what kind of queer folk would run for the Conservative Party? Like, what kind of, well, let's see. She tweeted out, coming out as conservative was much harder than telling anyone I was gay. Cheers to being yourself. Yeah, that checks. That checks out. That's the type of queer person that would run for conservative. Yep. The one that will play victim even harder by her chosen political values. That's where she's the victim. Anyway, back to the article. Yeah, like, can she be shocked that a right-wing horrible network would then start getting homophobic and stuff? But that's not the hard part for her. It's, you know, being conservative and how her friends now view her. Menzies was also removed from a 29 campaign event at the Conservative for the then Conservative leader, Andrew Scheer. So, you know, it doesn't matter if people are on the left or the right for David Menzies and Rebel News. They will use whatever they can to get into the headlines. Rebel News widely shared video of the latest incidents, advertising shock footage on its website. Christias Freeland's bodyguards assault and arrest David Menzies when he asked her questions, says a headline on the website, and they describe how brutal the assault was and stuff. And it's like, no, like the police overstepped their bounds, absolutely, but he wasn't brutally arrested. You know, he wasn't assaulted in the manner people would normally think of assault when you hear that word. When he was arrested, he was manhandled a little bit because he was resisting, and again, the police shouldn't be that aggressive even to begin with. But you know, here's David saying it was such a brutal attack on me and freedom of press and all that sort of stuff. The police lied about the assault. They're the ones who assaulted him, the website claimed. Its post about the incident, according to data from Twitter, parts of the video have been seen by millions of social media users. I guarantee you there's going to be American right-wing media sources that will pick up on this. And that, again, goes to the right is very good at coalescing across the border, like teaming up and supporting each other, cross-border solidarity, something I'm still trying to fight for more on the left. But still on the left, people in the States, when they hear about Canadian news, will roll their eyes. You know, I've seen the comment section when I've called into the Majority Report. I know it happens, where people, it's like, this is a Canadian issue. Why do we care? Well, the right is so good at supporting each other. The left needs to get there too. Rebel News founder considering legal action. Reached by email Tuesday, Ezra Levant. So that's part of the founder of Rebel News. Not to get confused with Ezra Miller down in the States. We have Ezra Levant and Rebel News. And then in the States, you have Ezra Miller and Rebel HQ, which are not the same things. He said, and Menzies are considering legal action against the police for what transpired. Yeah, so they're considering legal action for that, but you know, all the people who I've shown footage of, you know, the encampments being destroyed and all that sort of stuff, they don't get to consider legal action towards the police for what they did. But for this minor tap, they're, oh no, it's definitely. We have not yet finalized our legal strategy, but at this point, I would expect we have sued both the RCMP and the York Regional Police, as well as Christia Freeland, for false arrest, false imprisonment, malicious persecution, and assault. He's such the victim. Oh no, he's such a victim. These government defendants will have unlimited public resources, whereas we take no public funds. Therefore, we will crowdfund David's litigation. Ah, there we go. There. You see it? They're going to crowdfund off of this. Okay, more into that in a second. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre condemned the arrest, reposting a video of the incident with the message, "This is the state of freedom of press in Canada in 2024 after 8 years of Trudeau." So Pierre Poilievre is now legitimizing Rebel News by posting this. He's giving them some level of legitimacy. Conservative MP Marilyn Gladue, part of the Civil Liberties Critic, said in the media statement she wants the House of Commons Heritage Committee to be recalled from its winter break to study the matter and demand transparency and accountability regarding Menzies' arrest. So, you know, people dying of COVID, of poverty, you know, all these other horrible things, you know, the war in Gaza, which is something, you know, foreign policy, that's a federal government thing. We don't need to call the House back for that. But for this little incident there, we demand that we get recalled from the winter break to deal with this. Yeah, and here's another tweet from Pierre Poilievre about this. A journalist was arrested for questioning a Liberal minister, and the parliamentary press gallery doesn't say a word. Trudeau has divided media into two groups, those he's bought off with bailouts and those he censors and has arrested. Sign here to support a free press. So, you know, Pierre is also using this to campaign with. And yeah, Justin Trudeau hasn't bought off the press. Again, there's lots of ways you can criticize him. That's not one of them. The press serves the status quo, the establishment. And the establishment is found both within Liberals and Conservative parties. So they don't serve Justin Trudeau. He hasn't bought off anyone because the CBC, which is government funded, is not funded by the Liberal Party or Justin Trudeau. It's funded by the government, regardless of who's in power. But he's using this to, you know, to grift off of it. And what I do actually appreciate is here's Pierre Poilievre tweeting this out, and the top comments are actually pushing back. Whoa, you and Rebel News both grifting off this incident almost like it was a coordinated, pre-planned. Ooh, maybe. Was this a false flag operation? And somebody saying, hi, Pierre, instead of lying, let's use truth facts. Calling Menzies a journalist is laughable. Police didn't end up charging him. He has a history of getting arrested. Your own MP Lanceman had him arrested in 2021. This was a fundraising grift stunt. See below. So you see this here. Do I have that there? So they have pinned this incident to the top of their Twitter feed. And in it, so fast, they've put help fund our legal fight, standwithdavid.com. Just like that. They're using it to fundraise. That took them, it was almost like they had this planned out. To fund their legal fight right there. It's right. They've already included it in the video. Rebel News is not a journalist. And the main question was arrested for assaulting a police officer. So that's Rebel News for you. Oh, they're hiring, are they? They're hiring view all jobs. Let's see. Ooh, intern at Rebel News. Newsroom and content manager. You know, I'd probably be pretty good at that. So how many super chats have I gotten today? Just kidding. I don't know. They're high. There's not enough money in the world. Not enough money in the world for me to work for them. Nope. So Jessa on Twitter, kind of, again, some of the people that are speaking out, you know, I'm not going to boost Rebel News with the retweet, but arresting journalists for asking questions of a deputy PM is fascism. Those charges won't stand, and he wasn't charged at all, but this tactic to recoil against nonetheless, yes. All arresting the Rebel News assholes will do is help legitimize them, and that's exactly what it does, you know. It gives them the clout, everything they want. And somebody pointing out, like, a plainclothes officer stood in front of him, and when he nudged him, arrested for assault. That's not okay. Yeah. It's not okay that he was even temporarily arrested, put in handcuffs for this. And a lot of people saying, like, they don't agree with that, even though they think Rebel News is crap. And that's, these are my moots on Twitter. Like, these are, when we say freedom of the press, we do mean it for everyone, even organizations we don't agree with. And we have to push for that, even though a lot of these people are more than happy to see us get shut down. But it's important, you know, to base your principles in, like, to actually stick to principles. To have, I'm getting words mixed up here. To have your values based in principles that you stick to. So when we don't want police arresting people for frivolous actions, we mean everyone, even people we think are horrible people. And yeah, somebody else also pointing out, it's like, wait, there's already a fundraising site for this? Yes. Over and over, they harass people till they are detained or simply told to step back. They whine and play the victim, lie about claims of being arrested, and then they donate, and then the donate emails and videos go out. It's a scam. Yeah, Rebel News is just a scam. That's on the video there. It is just... Rebel News are bad actors. They are. And he did a very bad job of acting in that video too. Let's see, did I want to use this one?
The RCMP.
Let's see if I wanted to.
MP is facing criticism for arresting a man who identified himself as a journalist. David Menzies works for Rebel News. He tried to ask the Deputy Prime Minister some questions yesterday in Richmond Hill, Ontario, when the arrest happened.
Ask a question to Christopher
I'm
Freeland
just going
when
to
he's
skip
blocked
over
by the
past the
to
actual video.
Ask a question to
you guys, well, actually, no, I think this is the good place to actually show the video because it's not going to directly boost Rebel Media on Twitter if you see it here. So let's do that then, because CBC here shows it, which again just helps to legitimize. Like, that's the conflict I face a lot of the times. I don't want to legitimize these groups, but Canadians have to be aware that they exist up here, and they have to be aware of the tactics. And also, my little tiny channel isn't going to help to legitimize anyone. Who am I kidding? Let's go back to here.
How come the IRGC is not a terrorist group? Why is your government supporting Islamo-nationalism? What? These idiots. What do you mean?
So that there is what he got arrested over.
What? These idiots.
That plainclothes officer that stepped into his path. That's why he was arrested.
Arrest for assault? Why are you pushing me? You're under arrest for assault. You're under arrest for assault. Police, you're under arrest for assault.
And here is CBC News using a video from Rebel News that actually has the fundraising message in it as well. It's there. To standwithdavid.com, you can still kind of make it out there.
You pushed into me. I was just scrubbing. I got my credentials here, and you just bumped into me. So police, you're under arrest. What is your name and your badge? What is your name and your badge?
Yeah, walking up to these two, you could probably tell that maybe they are in security, but there's no way to know that they're actually police.
You've been told you're under arrest. Why am I under arrest? He blocked my way. What? I was just scrumming Christian Freeland. I'm a police officer. You're under arrest. What is your...
Yeah, what about him says police officer? I see security guard. Absolutely. I don't see anything about him that says police officer.
Name and your badge. How is that possible?
So just to kind of reiterate a little bit of what we saw in that video, we saw that Menzies tried to ask a question to Christian Freeland when he's blocked by the RCMP security detail and then told that he's under arrest. And he responds by saying, well, he was just asking questions, and moves to show his credentials to the RCMP detail. That video was released by Rebel News. It's not the entire video. The full version of the video goes on to show Mr. Menzies being arrested by York Regional Police. We did reach out to that police service that said that he was later later released for having not posed a credible threat to the public, and he was released without conditions. Now,
Yeah, so he was released, and I have another police story to get to. Where here is, Rebel News and Menzies complaining about his treatment here and how the charges were dropped. I'm about to contrast that with something.
David Menzies is a reporter for Rebel News, which is a media organization that prides itself on its own website of being outside of mainstream media. It presents itself as having a conservative worldview. But this move from the RCMP detail is receiving
Yeah, to put this in relation to the States, I wouldn't even say that Rebel News would be like the Fox News equivalent, because they're much worse than that. Like, they're much more of a tabloid rag than that. Like OANN or something like that. I don't know. It is just to even say that they're Canada's versions of Fox News would be giving them so much more credit than they deserve.
quite a bit of criticism online and from some prominent people for how Mr. Menzies was treated by police. It was also criticized by the leader of the Conservative Party, Pierre Poilievre, who posted on X, formerly known as Twitter, saying, "This is the state of freedom of the press in Canada in 2024.
Yeah, so please donate to Pierre Poilievre. Yeah, they just use all this to fundraise and you know, grift off of each other and help build each other up. And it's ridiculous that people don't see through this more often. And the thing is that Pierre Poilievre is doing this to get into the good graces of Rebel News, but Rebel News won't hesitate to, you know, talk trash about Pierre Poilievre should it serve their purpose. Like, they have no principles. They have nothing. It's all about the grift.
Now, it is worth noting that this is not the first time Menzies has been arrested in trying to speak to politicians. In fact, even prior today, there was already a website that was set up intended to fundraise on behalf of Menzies when he is arrested. And, you know, it's also happened when he's talked to conservative politicians. For instance, he was forcibly removed from an Andrew Scheer event as well as a Melissa Lantsman event in 2021. But Ezra Levant, the publisher of the website, is saying that they are considering legal action, and they're also fundraising for that legal action on a website that's been set up following, or not following, but being promoted as part of this arrest that happened yesterday. The RCMP has not responded to request for comment.
Yeah, so it is just a fundraising grift, and the police played right into their hands. They helped with this, because this will just only benefit Rebel News. Now, I was saying that I was about to contrast this because you're not going to hear Rebel News, Dave Menzies, Ezra Levant say anything about this. And here's the thing. I have to go to Al Jazeera News to cover this because there's very, very little coverage of this in mainstream media in Canada. So from Al Jazeera, dropped the charges against Indigo 11 Peace 11 protesters. People peacefully protesting a Canadian business for openly supporting the Israeli military as it commits egregious war crimes should not be branded anti-Semites and treated like common criminals. On November 22nd, Canadian police conducted coordinated pre-dawn raids on 7 homes across the Greater Toronto area and made 10 arrests. They broke doors, ordered suspects out of bed, and went on to completely ransack every single room and then confiscate computers, cars, and other private property, in some cases in the presence of terrified children and the elderly. Remember, this was in Canada. Yeah, Canada. Looking at its ferocity and size, involving dozens of officers and presumably costing taxpayer hundreds of thousands of dollars, you could be excused to think the raids were in part of a massive counter-terror operation or targeting high-level, violent, hard-to-pin-down drug dealers and gang members. Shockingly? Okay, I'm not shocked. This was not the case. The suspects, known to their supporters collectively as the Peace 11, included One that was arrested separately on November 14th were professors, community organizers, legal workers, and labor activists targeted for ostensibly dangerous offenses of plastering posters and splattering washable paint on the window of a Toronto branch of the Indigo bookstore chain. Yep, that washable paint. Yeah, gotta be careful of washable paint. They had taken actions against the store, like hundreds of others across Canada, to protest the material support Indigo owners have long been providing to the Israeli military. So a lot of people online wanted to say that the people doing this protest were being anti-Semitic, that they were targeting it because it's a Jewish-owned store, where it's not the case. The owners of this Indigo have been supporting the military. Like, literally, they're involved with the genocide. For their transgressions, the 11 suspects were all charged with mischief, property damage over $5,000, and criminal harassment. 10 of them were further charged with conspiracy to commit an indictable offense. Indictable offense, whatever. If the prosecutor decides to proceed by way of indictment, which is a very real option, the accused can receive prison sentences of up to 10 years. In Canada. Yeah, David, what was his name, from Rebel News, feels the police should be sued for temporarily arresting him and letting him go with no charges for doing that. So where is Rebel News on this? You know, where are they speaking out against the treatment of peaceful protesters right now? Considering the suspects caused no physical harm to anyone, posed no immediate threat to society, and displayed no flight risk, why did the police, who had already secured warrants to search their homes, opt to conduct incredibly expensive and aggressive early morning raids on their homes? Why was this apparent show of force, this act of intimidation, necessary? It seems the raids were designed to terrorize and scare into silence Canadians who have been taking to the streets in large numbers in Toronto over the past few weeks to call for an end to Israel's war on Gaza. And just remember, this can happen to the protesters, and this is definitely made to intimidate and stuff, and yet so many people were upset with that those pro-Palestinian marches going through communities because, you know, of possible intimidation of saying that the war should end. You know, that's horrible, but, you know, it's totally okay to do this to peaceful protesters that were actually protesting at a location, not causing harm to anyone. And these early morning raids, during which peaceful protesters were treated as violent criminals and humiliated in front of their family members, are not even the most troubling aspect of this intimidation campaign. The media coverage of protest actions and its aftermath, in nature of the charges and the police messaging on the case, raise serious questions about the abuse of police powers and systemic anti-Palestinian discrimination in Canada. Founded in 1996, Indigo Books and Music Inc. stands as the largest Canadian book retailer chain, with CEO Heather and her husband Gary controlling more than 60% of the company's share. In 2005, her name was Heather. Well, they, who are Jewish Canadians, established the HESEG Foundation for Lone Soldiers, which provides financial support and educational opportunities to foreigners who have served in the Israeli military. Since 2006, Indigo bookstores have faced protests and boycotts, so this is nothing new. This has been happening for quite some time, these protests against Indigo for their support of the Israeli military. Due to the HESEG Foundation's overt support for Israeli and military support. I gotta slow down my reading, so I'm not reading words ahead of time and then composing the sentences in my head as I go along. Foundation's overt support for Israel and its military, and consequent complicity in the oppression and dispossession of Palestinian people. According to the Canada Revenue Agency, in 2022 alone, the foundation paid at least 5.5 million Canadian dollars in scholarships and grants to foreign Israeli military recruits. Given HESEG's efforts to increase foreign recruitment to the Israeli military, Indigo, the owners of Indigo are undoubtedly legitimate targets for protests, especially amid Israel's continuing bombardment, siege, and ground invasion of the Gaza Strip, which in just under 3 months has killed more than 22,000 people, many of them children, and led several UN experts and genocide scholars to warn of risk of genocide. Nevertheless, merely for gluing posters accusing Reisman of funding genocide and pouring red paint representing blood on the doors and windows of an Indigo branch, the Peace 11 were immediately accused of committing an anti-Semitic act. All news reports on the protest actions include references to anti-Semitism, and most implied Indigo was targeted only because it is a Jewish or Jewish-owned business. Most media organizations did not even touch upon the store owner's long history of support for the Israeli military or the protests that their businesses have faced because of it for nearly 20 years. The reports on this protest were also bundled in with the coverage of raising anti-Semitism in Canada, which led to people protesting for peace being branded as hateful anti-Semites, taking advantage of the current moment to target Toronto's Jewish population and businesses. This was, of course, a horrible smear against protesters, some of whom are themselves Jewish, that harmed their reputation and led to them facing suspension from their jobs and other serious professional and personal consequences. Furthermore, the media's amplification of this misleading narrative allowed the Toronto police to treat the protests as a hate-motivated offense and use it to further state-backed efforts to conflate criticism of Israel with anti-Semitism. In an undoubtedly calculated move, the police force even announced the arrest of Peace 11 alongside a statement of the rise of anti-Semitism incidences across Toronto, which further reinforced the perception that the protesters against Indigo bookstores were anti-Semitic. Instead of swallowing the official narrative hook, line, and sinker and blindly joining the race to accuse all who dare to criticize Israel's actions against Palestinian people of anti-Semitism, had the media done their job of uncovering facts and putting the acts of Peace 11 in relevant context, they would have found a real story to report. A leading Canadian business providing material support to a foreign military force presently accused of committing war crimes and even genocide. The police and state's forceful response to peaceful and justified protests against Indigo and its owners was an egregious overreach, which not only inflicted immense harm on the Peace 11, but also damaged Canada's credentials as a democratic state where residents' rights to peaceful protest and free speech are protected. While acknowledging that anyone vandalizing property should be prosecuted to the full extent of the law, when the Peace 11 appears in court next week, prosecutors must act with the legal system integrity in mind, proceeding with these charges as standard summary conviction vandalism offenses rather than indictable charges is crucial to prevent disrepute to the concept of hate-motivated crimes and the Canadian justice system. Better yet, given the damages already done to the reputations and reputation of the state, the charges should be stayed or dropped against Peace 11. Yeah, where's the right-wing media saying this was horrible? And from CJPME, they also reported on this when this happened. Toronto police action against anti-war activists is unjustified. And so that's the Canadians for Justice and Peace in the Middle East. That's their organization. And they also kind of go over the history that, you know, this Indigo has been funding, helping to fund Israeli military recruits for years and years and years. And they also have here a call to drop the charges against Peace 11 Indigo protesters. Last month, 11 peace activists were violently arrested by Toronto police and are being investigated for criminal mischief for allegedly putting in red paint and posters on the storefront of an Indigo bookstore in protest. So they're just saying here, use the fields below to send an email to Indigo executives and Ontario Attorney General and tell them to drop the charges against Peace 11 and everyone speaking up for Palestinian liberation. Protesting war and genocide is not hate. And so their goal is to get to 2,000 emails. They already have 1,661. I will remember to put this in the description box when I am done this video. Or you can just look it up. That's on the cjpme.org website. I'll try to remember to put this into the description. Yeah, so that's the state of Canada's police state. It's kind of all over the place, but still kind of, you know, it has a common thread throughout of somehow always benefiting right-wing stances. Because even the arrest of David Menzies, benefits the right wing. You know, it's always attacking, you know, it's always the police supporting right-wing causes while attacking. Like, that's the thing. I don't even want to say that they're left-wing causes because human rights shouldn't be a political cause. It shouldn't be branded as a left or a right-wing thing. It's just, it's a right, you know, destroying people's homes in the encampments and stuff. That shouldn't be a left-wing, right-wing issue. It should just be people have the right to shelter themselves if the state isn't willing to provide shelter for them. Like, it's just, we see it all the time. And again, people tend to think that Canada is such a bastion of progressive values and we're so, you know, we're like a socialist nation and stuff of that sort, but we're so far from it. But again, I'm just going to blame the Americans. You guys are just so much worse that you're distracting from our problems. It's all your fault, America. It's your fault that we're in this situation. I'm just going to blame America for everything. It really is like that. So many different takes. Like, I found it astonishing over the past few days coming across all these different stories relating to police and how different they were, yet still have that common thread. Because you have them dismantling the encampments, violently dismantling encampments. Then you have them apologizing for doing the bare minimum of a decent act by handing coffee over to protesters that was already bought for them, while denying other protesters from joining that protest, to arresting somebody who shouldn't have been arrested. You know, the police definitely overstepped their bounds by doing that, and yet that still benefits that right-wing organization that they arrested, to having, you know, going in and arresting peaceful protesters by storming their homes in the early hours of the morning in front of their family and terrifying them and confiscating equipment and charging them with egregious crimes of putting red paint on a window. That's a lot. That's a lot. Oh. And Canadians simply aren't talking about a lot of this enough. Not the way we should be. And it misleads everyone into thinking that we're far from where the United States is when it comes to fascism and things of that sort, where it's like, we're not actually that far off. But how it will look here will be a lot different than how it looks in the States, just given how different our systems are. But it's not like we aren't following suit. Anyway, let's go to the sandbox. And I'm already at almost 2.5 hours for my short stream. And we haven't even talked about Star Trek yet. We'll get there. We'll get to the Star Trek. We'll end this with talking about Star Trek. Grand Theft Autobot, they actually say brutally arrested. It's all over their social media, yeah. That's how they're referring to it. Let's see. Okay, I think that's where I left off the chat. So let's start scrolling down. So I scroll up to where I think I left it off, and then I start scrolling down, trying to find, again, comments where I know the context and what you're talking about, and it's not just part of a conversation happening in the sandbox. Grand Theft Autobot, she really thinks the leopards won't eat her face, huh? Yeah, you're talking about Melissa Lansman there, aren't you? Yeah, just saying, "Oh no, it's so much harder for me to tell all my liberal friends that I'm conservative and the way that they treat me after I say I'm conservative." And it's like, huh, you know, I would treat people pretty badly too if they joined a political organization that was literally trying to erase me from society. I might be a little bit hostile towards them. Good for Gabby. Grifters apply. Yeah, yeah. Talking about the job openings over at Rebel News. I give everyone the right to, let's see something. I don't know, just the right to be mad at me if I were to ever go there. You can call me a grifter in every sort of horrible name possible, but I'm not, so it doesn't matter. I'm just trying to think, like, is there any lefty people that have just been out of work recently that you could imagine? It's like, oh, so the next spot is Rebel News. Like, I know Mehdi Hassan is recently out of MSNBC, but he would never stoop that low. I'm trying to think of, like, somebody who's leaving the left, but would know enough. Like, and just, yeah, I can't think of anyone to make this a funny statement, so I'll just drop it right now. Coffee is necessary now. You should work with the Majority Report. That would be awesome. I would love to. That's if you're referring to me. I have no idea who you're referring to. When I talk about cross-border solidarity. Yeah, that would be nice. And welcome to the chat. I did a very long speech about some things that you said in my last videos right after it crashed, and then I started up again. So I don't know if you want to get caught up on that. I just want to, like, I do cover, it's about TYT, and you were saying that you're also a fan of them. And it's like, I know when I cover stuff on TYT, it's not about me just pissing on TYT for the sake of it, because I do understand that they still do a lot of good work, and I agree with them on most things. So I always try to make sure that the things that I'm calling them out for are legit reasons. Like, it's the whole leftist infighting thing that can sometimes get under. I'm not accusing, by no means am I accusing you of saying this or anything. But I know a lot of people will just say, you know, leftist infighting, oh, everything means, you know, all that sort of stuff. And it bothers me because sometimes there are legitimate reasons to call out other people on the left. And so I won't call out TYT for things that I feel are just clickbait. Like, there has to be a reason behind it. And I don't knock anyone for still watching the network, because there's still a lot of fantastic people on that network. I just personally, they've crossed too many lines for me, so I personally can't. I just want them to be better, that's all. My dogs are goth. A long time ago, I tried recommending Rebel HQ to Canadian friend. She said, no, thank you. That's when I learned about conservative news, Rebel News. Yeah. You can get a lot of, like, there's a lot of, like, mixed matching that can go on between the two countries because, like, also your Democrats are blue and your Republicans are red, whereas our liberals are red and our conservatives are blue. So when we talk about a blue wave up in Canada, that would not be a good thing. And then we have Rebel News versus Rebel HQ and Ezra Levant versus Ezra Miller, which are two very different people. Andrew K., you're under arrest for wearing that stupid hat. Gee, you really want Tim Pool to cover this, don't you? My dogs are goth. Sandy's skin is flawless. Not really. There's a bit of makeup going on here. A lot of makeup going on. My God, if I ever came onto screen without my makeup, like at least the bare minimum, like foundation, concealer, and powder, you guys would think I'm near death. Yeah, it's a heavy layer of foundation on. Zero PE. Damn, some chips and dip would be really yummy right about now. Ooh, yeah. Just reminded me I haven't eaten supper yet. I was expecting this to be a short stream, and we still haven't even gotten into Star Trek. Oh. Looney Tunes 9000, Left of the Box. I would never recommend this, but Rebel HQ now has a video featuring Mr. Zionist Ben Glebe traveling to Israel and speaking to October 7th survivors. Just pass it. Oh my God. You know, again, it's one of the things like that network has been pushing away the far more progressive people from their network, yet still fully endorse and support Ben. And they try to say that it's a both sides thing, but it's like, I can't see Jank letting a climate denier go on their network and just spew all this climate denial stuff. You know, I can't see him having an anti-vaxxer on staff and just spewing anti-vaxxer stuff without any pushback. And it's like on the main show, when Jank is on with Ben, Jank will push back to some extent, not nearly enough. But Ben still does a lot of his own segments for Rebel HQ, for when he's headlining and stuff, where he gets no pushback on his genocide denial rants. And I can't imagine Jank allowing that for like a climate denier being allowed to make Rebel HQ videos. Or an anti-vaxxer making Rebel HQ videos. Trying to say it's a both sides thing, but for somehow with this issue it's okay. Canada, Soul Life Canada is going to be full-blown fash, but with health and dental. We don't have dental. There's a means-tested dental plan out there, but it's not a thing. Okay. Grand Theft Autobot was leaning on his keyboard, petting his cat. I suddenly see a whole bunch of messages being deleted for you. Okay, let's talk Star Trek. So at the beginning of this stream, I was mentioning to people that I had tweeted out, I think it was just yesterday, a little bit of a guessing game challenge. I'm rewatching Star Trek Next Generation, and it's really interesting just watching it from the perspective of like a fully politically aware adult and watching it in order. And I'm now on season 7. And so this is when the crossover with Deep Space Nine starts happening. So unfortunately, I don't have the Blu-rays. There are no Blu-rays of Deep Space Nine. So I've had to find other ways of watching it. But in one day, I watched an episode of Star Trek Next Generation, an episode of Deep Space Nine that made me teary. like the Deep Space Nine one just made me tear up, but the Star Trek Next Generation one made me cry. And I remember when I was younger and watched that episode, Star Trek Next Generation, it made me cry as well. And it was the only episode of Star Trek Next Generation that made me cry. So I gave people a challenge. Which episode was it? And I just gave a huge hint. It was in season 7. And I had lots of guesses and nobody guessed it. But then I realized, like, if I ever want a day of just like purging cry, all I have to do is like play all of those Star Trek episodes that we're listing together. And it's like, yep, just purge it out of the system. The episode was called Dark Page. And it was the episode Deanna Troi found out she had a sister. That one, yeah, it just the like the acting in it and everything was just so spot on. And there's going to be spoilers. So if you don't want to be spoiled, plug your ears. I don't know, you can mute it. Yeah, her mother goes into a psychic coma for telepathy reasons after she was helping out another species that used to only speak through telepathy, and that unlocked a dark page in her mind. And then Deanna had to travel into her mother's mind to find out what was happening, to release her from that, or her mother was going to die. And in it, she found out that when she was a baby, she had an older sister who died. And her mother had blocked it out of her memory because she couldn't deal with the pain. And that episode just was the most gut-wrenching thing to me, because I have issues with family myself. And, you know, I've always craved the idea of having a normal family, a real family and stuff. And so issues around family can really get to me in series like this. And especially when I was younger and so sensitive to that sort of thing. Oh my God, it wrecked me. And then even I'm watching it yesterday and I'm like, I'm going to hold it together. No, I'm going to, and then it's like, no, I'm totally going to lose it. I'm going to lose it. I've lost it. Yeah. But that episode also had a very young Kirsten Dunst in it too. But yeah, that episode to me was just absolutely gut-wrenching. It just totally made me so sad and cry. Grand Theft Autobot spoilers for like a 20-year-old show. Yes, because you never know when people are going to rewatch this series, or they've completely forgotten about it and are rewatching it like me. Because, well, I remembered that episode, but I've recently come across a few Star Trek TNG episodes where it's like, I remembered nothing of him. Even though I know I've seen all of the episodes, but it's happening more in season 7, I think, because I wasn't watching the repeats of season 7 as much, because as you're catching up on seasons, you rewatch older seasons and things of that sort. But there's been a couple episodes in season 7 where it's like, I don't remember anything. of this episode. It's like this episode never happened. This is new to me. And I've run into a few Deep Space Nine episodes like that already, and I'm just starting season 1, you know. But it's so interesting watching these as an adult with a political awareness and just how incredible that series actually was, and how, you know, beyond its time it was when it came to political commentary. And it's still, I find it hilarious that a lot of people try to claim that it's not a political show. It's such a political show. But the Deep Space Nine episode I wanted to talk about, I can't show you anything about it because every time I've tried to show any like TV or movie media, even just a frame, I get into trouble with the YouTube. So I'm just going to say that it's called Duet, and it's in the first season. So Deep Space Nine, it's still in the first season, so it's still finding its legs, and the acting is still very, you know, the actors are still trying to find their groove. They're still trying to find their balance with each other and everything, and it shows and stuff. But then there's this one episode that happens that just kind of hits you aside the head. And I remember when I was younger watching this, and I was watching them at the same time as my best friend back then. We were both very much into Star Trek. And we were watching this episode. So I should probably give you the synopsis of the episode so you can understand a little bit more of what I'm about to say. So the synopsis of the episode is, Kira Nerys is a Bajoran, and they're on Deep Space Nine, which is at the mouth of a wormhole, but also very close to, what is the name of the Bajoran homeworld? Bajor, that's it. So Bajor had been conquered by the Cardassians, and for the past 50 years, a brutal occupancy of the Cardassians. You know, you might already start understanding where this is going. So they were occupied by the Cardassians, and it was a brutal occupation. And the Cardassians had recently left, and Kira had been a freedom fighter within that. And so she fought against the Cardassians and stuff of that sort. And at the space station, a ship docked, and on it was a Cardassian who had a certain illness that was only a result from being at this one mine where the Bajoran slaves were treated just beyond brutal. And so she finds out that he's this horrible person and wants to persecute him and stuff of that sort. And then they start finding out that he isn't who he says he is. Because at first he just says that he's a file clerk, but Kira doesn't believe that, and she wants to persecute him because she's just so upset with everything the Cardassians have done. And so she keeps looking into it, and they find his picture, and then they match the picture up to the leader of this horrendous, like, I'm trying to find the right language for it. He ran this camp, this internment camp, where that was extremely brutal and stuff like that, and his picture matches up to that. And so she's ready to, you know, persecute him, get him arrested. You know, this is going to be justice for Bajor to see him put on trial and everything for the horrible war crimes that he did. But as they keep on digging in, they find out that, again, he's not who he seems to be. And they find out that he actually had cosmetic surgery to look like this person, to look like the leader of this internment camp. And she's very confused as to why this happens. And so she finally confronts him about it. And then, like, why were you saying, like, how do you know who this file clerk is? And it turns out he was that file clerk. But he would go to bed every night, covering his ears, trying to drown out the screams. but he felt so helpless to do anything about it because he was just one lonely man. But he was impacted by it and he didn't know what to do. And he couldn't tolerate the horrors he was seeing. And so he had hoped that by taking on this image of the leader of that camp, this horrible, horrible person, and purposely getting caught by Akira, that he might give some justice to what happened by going on trial and being executed, that he could finally do something about the horrendous situation that he witnessed but was powerless to do anything against. And that this would actually then, by him going on trial as this person, would then force Cardassia to acknowledge the horrid war crimes and genocide that it did. And he completely breaks down for this and stuff. And it's just, again, the acting, everything in this episode just so spot on. And I remember watching this as a kid with my friend, and before the episode had come to its conclusion, she was just saying, oh, all Cardassians are the same. Like, they're all horrible, blah, blah, blah. And I remember, you know, I learned my lessons from Star Trek well. I'm like, you shouldn't put everyone under the same blanket, you know. Just because he's Cardassian doesn't mean anything. And I was proven right. Just want to say I was right. But just seeing the parallels between that episode to what is happening now hit me so much differently now than when I was a kid. Because when he was playing the leader of this internment camp, he was dismissing the genocide. Like, oh, it didn't really happen. And it's like, well, it was at a camp, an internment camp. Of course, some people would die and some people weren't happy. And just, you're seeing so much of that now with Israel and Gaza. Just this denial of the horrors that is happening there, and this need to want to hold people accountable, and yet this feeling of helplessness as being somebody who is witnessing this but not able to do anything to stop it. That episode just kind of gets to all of that, and it just really hit me hard this time. Because yeah, like the Cardassian, the file clerk was right that, you know, what is it going to take for the Israeli government, the Zionists, to acknowledge what they're doing? Because that was his hope by taking on this character, was so that they would at least then, if this went to court, then they would acknowledge it. And, you know, that's the hope of what South Africa is doing now by taking them to the International Court of Justice. That by doing this, it would force at least other nations to understand. Like it would wake them up that, yes, this is a genocide. What is going on is a genocide. War crimes are being committed. That, you know, the Israeli officials who are in charge of this, that they'll actually have to own it. That they might actually be held accountable for what they're doing. But we've seen it so many times in the past where these horrible things can happen, and the people who caused them never get held accountable. That people never learn the lesson. And I just, yeah, watching that episode was just so painful, because seeing him break down, talking about how he would just cover his ears at night. And there's so many times where, you know, I want to turn off the screen. I don't want to see it. All the horrible things that are happening over in Gaza right now. Because there's nothing I can do to make it better. There's nothing I can do to make it stop. And there's just that sense of helplessness that you're watching this unfold in history. And you're just there to witness it. And you just wish that there was more that individuals could do in this circumstance. And then you see people who do stand up for Palestinians, who then get brutally arrested, who lose their jobs. All of this. And it's just like, it's the powers that be. It's the dynamics and how unfair it is. But it's also just this deep down fear that the Israeli government will never be held accountable for what they did. And if they're not held accountable, then what's stopping the next nation and the next nation and the next nation from doing what they're doing? Even here in Canada, my government has never really been held accountable for what it's done to Indigenous peoples. Never. We had the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, which was just a bunch of words. But there's no actions behind it. You know, the lives of Indigenous peoples in this country hasn't improved because of it. There's been no real, like, our history still isn't being taught properly. The government still, they'll just say it was a cultural genocide. They won't actually admit to the fact that it was a genocide. All those people, everything they went through, still being denied their experiences from the government that did it. And I'm part, you know, I'm Canadian. It's my government that did it, and there's nothing I can do to make it right. There's nothing I can do to get my government to own up to what it's done, to what it's still doing. Yeah, seeing that episode now, Duet on Deep Space Nine, just seeing it now with the context of everything I know as an adult, and especially what's currently happening in Gaza. Wow, did that episode ever hit hard? So I'd recommend everyone go and watch that episode if you have the ability to watch it. Because there's even one point where Kira's confronting him before he's acknowledged who he really is. And he's playing into to being this war criminal. And she says to him, it was genocide. And he replies back to her, it was just a day's work. And you see that so much with the people in Gaza saying it's genocide. And the IDF saying, it's just another day. This is just another day for us. Really, really powerful episode. So yeah, everyone go watch it. Let's see. Poor Grand Theft Autobot being picked on for leaning on the keyboard. Yes. People are still talking about Jank and what he was saying. I covered it in my last live stream. Luckily, I got the whole segment in right before it crashed, but Jank was literally saying that we need to see both sides of this when it comes to Israel and Palestine. that he doesn't believe it's genocide. Well, Chang believes it's genocide, but Ben doesn't believe it's genocide, and that it's important that both sides are showed. That is actually, yeah. I raged in that video a little. I was not happy with that. Andrew Kay saying the actress, I don't know how to pronounce her name, was amazing in that episode. Yeah. Really, that Star Trek TNG episode really gut-wrenching. Grand Theft Autobot, there are 4 lights. Yes, I know what you're talking about. Oh. Zero PE, I've never really watched DS9, but I heard it's the best depiction of socialism and communism of all the Star Trek shows. It definitely, like, I'll always prefer TNG just for nostalgic. Like, that I watched when I was young. That's what gave me my progressive values. Like, Jean-Luc Picard was a father figure to me, far better than anything I was getting in my family. Like, I can literally say I am who I am with a lot of the values I have because of that show. But Deep Space Nine has the best story arcs and like just hard-hitting social commentary out there. Especially when they get into the war with the Dominion and everything that happened. And yeah, it's really good. I'm really looking forward to rewatching all of DS9. My dogs are goth. Can I watch DS9 without seeing the other Star Treks? Yes and no. There are some crossover episodes, but they're not big to the plots. And there are some crossover characters, like especially when Worf comes in to Deep Space Nine. So you have a better understanding of some of the alien races, of some of the characters, like their backstories and stuff, if you know Star Trek TNG. That said, you don't absolutely necessary to have watched TNG in order to get what's going on in DS9. Because the war that they get into and stuff is with a new species. Most of the primary characters are newish. So, like, O'Brien is from the Next Generation, but he wasn't a main character in TNG. So, I can't say you need to have watched anything from TNG to know much about his character, because I can't think of any stories in TNG that would show an element of his character that you would need to get that isn't shown very clearly in DS9. However, when Worf comes in, not knowing his story and backstory and everything, it can get a bit tricky to understand where he's coming from. And yeah, just to understand some of the different alien species and how they operate or certain incidences, it helps a lot. But I wouldn't say it's absolutely necessary. There would just be times where you might have to Google something. That's it. Just watch TNG. TNG is amazing. My dogs are goth. If you're saying that you're going to watch the first episode of DS9 to see, to see if it's worth watching, It's one of the tricky things. Their first few episodes, not that great. Same with Star Trek Next Generation. Their first few episodes, not good. It takes a while for them to get into their groove. Like personally, I would say just watch Duet on its own, even though it's near the end of this first season, as a good gauge. But there's some really ridiculous episodes that start off in DS9. Same with Star Trek Next Generation. There's no way around it. Very campy in a way. So I would say if you're going to watch any episode Deep Space Nine to get a feel for it, watch Duet. Andrew K. Every character has such a great arc in DS9. Yeah, they all have such like rich stories going on to them that, you know, who they were when they started off and who they became, very different people. Whereas a lot of the TNG crew haven't necessarily changed much from where they were when they started. But with DS9, all of them, almost all of them, very different people by the end. Zero PE. All Ferengis do. They are the true capitalists of Star Trek. Libertarian capitalists, yeah. Looney Tunes 9000 to environmental coffee house viewers due to the violent winter weather in the Buffalo that has resulted in power outages. There will be no show tonight, so this will unfortunately be the end of the road. Ooh, hopefully everything is okay there. We're not getting hit hard here. This area tends to bypass a lot of the worst of the weather. Yeah, Andrew K mentioning that there's one where they form a union at Quark's Bar. Really good episode too. Yeah, there's a lot of social commentary. So much social commentary. Plus, this year is the year of the Bell Riots. Just saying. Who knows? Who knows? The Bell Riots are happening this year. They should. Grand Theft Autobot, the first season of TNG is hard to get through. Yes, it is. It is very campy. Yeah, they were still trying to figure things out. Some of the costumes were really bad. Just even their idea of what pretty people are was like, ooh, that's so 80s. So 80s. And I still just find it funny how it's like in the future, everything is shiny. Like the pillowcases, the sheets and stuff like that is made from like shiny fabric and stuff. But the thing is that I look back at it now and I have actually a very deep appreciation for what they were able to pull off, because they don't have the same special effects that we have these days. But they were still able to pull off some really good stuff for the time, considering what they had to work with. But then other things I've noticed are things like you can see the shadow of the Enterprise through the window onto the rings of one of the planets that they're going around. You know, that tiny little detail, the reflections in the windows when they're standing near them. They do a lot of interesting shots. Like, they're dynamic. They're not all just plain you know, headshots type things, like it's different angles and stuff. And especially when they're in crew quarters, they use a lot of mirrors. So they'll be shooting and then you don't realize that they're in a mirror until they shift away or something, and you realize that you were talking, you were seeing the mirror and then they're off to the side and stuff like that. Like they do a lot of work with that. And there's no way around it. Like even they were still very sexist and racist in a lot of issues. Because, you know, it started at the end of the 80s and into the early 90s. So you still have to watch it with those glasses on type thing, that idea. But I still have a very deeper appreciation for everything they did, because a lot of the commentary they did for the time was very bold. Z-Myth, first season of DS9 has like 2 good episodes. Yeah, they're pretty bad. Some of them are pretty bad. Sorry to hear about your Christmas gift, good for Gabby. Soul Life. I low-key liked Star Trek as a kid, but my mom's Republican husband liked it, and I never understood it. Well, my mom, like, that's part of the reason why I got into Star Trek, was my mom was watching it and stuff. And she's fairly conservative. Like, not right-wing, not by a long shot, but, you know, she leans more conservative on a lot of things. They just don't understand that all their conservative values go against everything Star Trek stands for and what Star Trek would be. Like, they see this magical vision of the future and how great it would be, and don't realize that conservative values takes away everything from that. They try to trick themselves into believing that somehow those conservative values will lead to this future utopia that they're seeing. Zenith, Riker grew a beard and became infinitely better. Yeah, there is actually a phrase now, when it comes to series and stuff, like grow the beard or something like that. Like after that, they changed. Like even when Cisco got his goatee, you know. I'm not going to say anything though about the Majority Report and Sam's beard. He wears the beard well, but I like clean shaven faces. Not that it matters what I like. And Sam was always good. He didn't need to wait. Mark Joycey, hello. I understand some of the sentiment going on in the sandbox about what it was like to be a hardcore TYT fan to now. And it's like, yeah, I was a hardcore TYT fan. I almost bought some of their merch way back when I was a member. I donated to some of their causes back when I had money. Like I was a big enough fan that I wanted to work for them. So, yeah. And if somebody back then knew me now and how I speak about them now, they'd be like, oh, okay. But, you know, it's the same, though, for me with everything. It's the principles, it's the values. If the Majority Report suddenly starts spewing really bad takes on certain issues, I'm calling them the fuck out, because I'm not going to put up with it. I'm not going to brush it off or dismiss it just because I really like them. And if that means that I can never look at the merch that I have from them again and feel the same way, then so be it. But I get the feeling they're not going to go down that road. Just all the takes and the stances that they've had. But it's also just TYT is a capitalist organization, capitalist corporation. Majority Report isn't. And it shows with their commentary just the stances they've taken, the values they live by. It's like you can be a member for the Majority Report when you don't have any money to give them. Z-Myth, The Bell Rats, also a great two-parter. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Even though I'm not keen necessarily on time traveling episodes of all sorts, that one's a good. Yeah, there's lots that I'm. There's actually a lot of episodes that I kind of remember from the seventh season of TNG that I'm like, oh, I'm looking forward to seeing that. And then it's like, I'm remembering so much more, and it's like, wow, it's like they're going to be cramming in a lot in the last bunch of seasons. Oh, thank you so much for the $5, Mark. Really, really appreciate it. And I'm glad you're able to catch the tail end of this live show. And Mark Joyce also saying Star Trek is why I'm a socialist. Oh, there's a message there. Ah, I can see the message. So Mark, with your super chat, Gene Roddenberry's utopic vision, while flawed, is something I really believe humanity can one day strive towards. Yeah, I really thought that's where humanity was going, was towards a more Star Trek utopia. Oh, how that has changed. But yeah, I just, again, watching Star Trek with more of a political awareness as an adult in order, that also helps. And just like saying how they no longer had the need for money and things, and how poverty and unhoused people weren't a thing anymore on Earth. And oh, sounds so great. Zero PE mentioning something about Lower Decks. I haven't watched all of those newer series yet. I don't have the right streaming services. So I haven't seen Lower Decks, but I want to see them all. I want to see them all. BKK. My mom is a left-leaning lib, but she started as a Catholic conservative, so there's been a lot of growth. I still try to push her away from CNN as nicely as possible. Yeah. I have family members that I try to push away from their stuff. Looney Tunes 9000. All hail Sam Cedar. Yeah, Sam Cedar is my Jean-Luc Picard of political understanding of my current age. So, yeah, Sam Cedar is to me now what Jean-Luc Picard was to me when I was growing up as a kid. There's so many things I would love to do deep dives on about Star Trek, though. So many commentary things, yeah. Zero PE. Sandy should talk to Andrea, LOL. She'll tell her about MR's bad takes. LOL. They're not perfect. But the vast majority of takes that they have, I tend to agree with. But, you know, I'm fully able and willing to be pointed out how wrong they are on things. Because I don't believe anyone should be up on a pedestal. You know, I try my best on here, but if I do something wrong, I want to know. And if I do something intentionally wrong, like I start grifting or something, then, well, I'm trying to think, it's like, no, that would never happen. That's not who I am. I don't know, there was a thought there, but it's now left my head. I'm trying to be as authentic as possible, but I'm not going to get it right all the time. And if I'm wrong on an issue, then I'm more than happy to learn and grow. However, there might be times where we don't fully agree on issues. Grand Theft Autobot. I remember rewatching TNG and hearing Tasha Yar's backstory and thought I was like, rape gangs? What were they thinking? Yikes. Yeah, that's something that I totally forgot about or went over my head because I'm rewatching it and I'm like, so she came from Planet Gang Rape? Like, what the hell? I totally did not remember that part. And it gets mentioned a few times, and then she talks about her right before she bangs Data, and I'm like, wow, okay. And that's like the second episode. Oh. See, Myth, don't forget, friends, we have to go through the suck before we get to the stars, at least according to the lore. Yeah. Grand Theft Auto 5, conservatives get to Star Trek first, it'll be more like Starship Troopers and Star Trek. And thank you again, Mark, for your second super chat. Remember Star Trek had a huge Third World War before Utopia? So, yeah. I'd like to bypass some of these horrible, horrible things. Like, it shouldn't have to get that bad before we start turning good. So, like, deep dives like what? I was mentioning this in a different live stream, but there's something about sexuality in men in Star Trek Next Generation that really, I think there's some major commentary that can go on there. And that is how the men are actually treated sexually. I think a lot of that gets overlooked. Like how, like it's primarily towards Riker and Picard. How they get harassed, assaulted, and in one episode, Riker even gets raped. But it's done as a lot of like the assault and things of that sort. It's done for comedic purposes, or it's just, you know, it happens, but it's never acknowledged or talked about or seen as a big deal. And I think there's some very interesting commentary behind a lot of that, and how the view of like sexuality and men, and how, you know, they're also put into a box when it comes to gender roles and that sort of thing. And so I think there's some very interesting commentary when it comes to that, because like in their episode that I just watched yesterday, Picard gets brutally assaulted, but since the species didn't know what they were doing, well, then no harm done, you know, and it's never, you never see the consequence of how it actually impacted him, or if it had any impact on him. But that level of assault, I would imagine it would, of that level of violation. So, like even just with Loxana and how she would treat Picard, and like there's just all these things that happen that was just passed off as funny or no big deal. That I think really, especially in a show that was progressive, teaching that value, I think was actually damaging. Zero PE, Andrea really disagrees with MR's position on COVID. Okay. Trying to think. I have no idea what her take on that is. Data was very attached to Tasha in a way that he could. Mark Joycey, Deanna Troy's mother is such a harasser. Yeah. Reminds me of like Miss Piggy in how she acts. Like, yeah, just the way that she imposes herself, touches other people, gets in their space, tries to manipulate. Like, it's, which to me then is such the contrast because of the episode I was saying that made me cry, and she's the main character in that episode. But yeah, just her portrayal of how she treats men, but it's like, oh, well, she's Betazoid, so that's okay. When no, it wasn't. Grand Theft Auto Bot, Deanna was assaulted several times too. Yeah. Yeah, some of the ways that the women were treated throughout the episodes too were also really bad. But there was also a certain level of sensitivity around it. Like it was acknowledged, at least in those episodes that I remember, that what happened was bad and a violation. But with the men, you never get that. My dog's a goth. Andrea means MR going to busy events, not always masking, etc. Andrea takes it very seriously, which I respect. Yeah. I still mask up when I go to the grocery stores. Okay. I think I'm done for this. Sorry, I just looked at the time and I'm like, this is going to be a short stream and this is probably my longest one ever. I don't even know why I try. I don't even know why I try. Yeah, so much for my short stream. I need to wrap things up though. I have a busy day tomorrow and stuff, and so I won't be streaming tomorrow because I have something that I'm doing earlier in the day, which I realize will just drain me and I won't be capable of doing a show tomorrow. So that's why I was doing it tonight. So I still plan on having a show Friday, so please see me on Friday. And there'll be more shenanigans, I'm sure, to cover by then. Let's start doing some of the things. I'm still needing a little bit of help paying off Frodo's vet bill, so if you can, please help out with that by sending an e-transfer if you're Canadian to SandeeLovas@gmail.com or the PayPal link in the description box below. Every little bit helps. I'm very close to getting his initial vet bills paid off. Let's do all of this stuff here. Boom, boom, boom. I'm getting so fancy. If you can, please become a patron. Linked in the description box below. These social medias, but just this one. This one. Mainly this one I'm still on. The Hostile Fart Sauna. There we go. I'm primarily still just on this one. I have art, which, right, next week I won't be doing shows. I'm taking my week off. So I didn't take a break during the holidays because I realized everyone else was, and sometimes people need familiar voices so they don't feel so lonely. So I didn't take a Christmas break, but I will be taking one next week to just unwind. I want to focus on art for a little bit. There's a whole bunch of drawings I want to do, so I just want to focus on art. So no live streams next week, if I can help it. Yeah. Thank you so much for everyone who's already become a patron, who has purchased things off my Amazon wish list, which is linked in the description box below. I recently got a little gift box from somebody that I really, really appreciate. Like, I really do mean it. Every little bit helps. Yeah, it really helps. It shows me, you know, it's nice to be appreciated, I guess, because I put a lot of work into these. It's a lot of time, energy, emotion, mental, everything. And it's nice to know when you're appreciated, which is hard to do when you don't have a live audience. I'm a performer. I like a live audience. But sharing, liking the stream, plugging me to other lefty content creators, that also helps. And that you don't need any money for, because I understand times are tough. And if I had the money, I'd be helping out a lot more people too. So also in the description box, no, not in the description box, in the comment section, if there was a segment from today that you really liked, let me know so I can think about clipping them. Because I think it might be easier if people let me know which parts they want clipped versus me just trying to randomly find things to clip in these videos. And yeah, I think that is it. I think that is it. And then I get distracted because, again, there's more people chatting, and it's like, if you guys stop chatting, I'll stop looking over at the sandbox, and then maybe I'll be able to end the stream. Grand Theft Auto bot. Time flies when you're having fun, no? Yeah. I was not expecting this stream to be this long. Anyway. Yeah, my hopeful future goals is to, you know, getting up to about 50 people watching a live stream would be nice. Okay, getting over 100 would be awesome. But, you know, it'll take time. But if you help by plugging me to other content creators, I'm more than happy to have other content creators on my show. I can't contact all of them because I'm not necessarily connected with them. Or getting me onto their shows to help raise my awareness stuff. I don't know. I'm losing words now. It's time for me to go to bed. No, actually, it's time for me to start getting ready to go to bed, which is like a 4-hour process, which I need to start now. Yes, it is nice to have these little intimate chats, 0PE. These are chats that I can at least follow along with for the most part. Watching the majority part, I can never really Like the chat just goes by so fast. And it's like, I have a hard time paying any attention to it. Anyway, got all those. Haven't had a cat come to my lap, but I'll just show people this. He's so cute. He's so cute. I wish he would eat more. Anyway, I should go. So, salut, à la prochaine. Thank you for watching. And oh, thank you to all the mods too. You rock. And thank you to everyone for coming out. Okay? Can I say goodbye now? I'll say goodbye now. Salut, à la prochaine. Thank you for watching and stay tuned. I'm Sandy, wishing your tomorrow is better than your today.